we're good.
Okay, I will now call to order the City of Sherwood Budget Committee meeting for May 22nd, 2025. David, will you please conduct roll call?
Chair Katie Strode,
Here?
Vice Chair Lana Painter. She said she'll be a little bit late. Brian Fairbanks. Present. Aaron, is it pronounced Weeb or Weeby?
Second one, yes.
Weeby, okay. I apologize. Matt Kaufman. Here. Thomas Sherwood. Here. Nancy Taylor. Here. Tim Rosner. Kim Young. Here. Renee Browse.
Here.
Taylor Giles.
Here.
Keith Mays is absent. Doug Scott.
Here.
Dan Stanky.
Okay, next item is approving Budget Committee minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the City Budget Committee meeting minutes for February 27th, 2025?
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. And then we'll move on to election of committee chair, which I will turn over to Finance Director David.
Yes, per ORS 294, the Budget Committee is required to elect the presiding officer at the first meeting when they receive the budget message. I would like to request Chair Strode to open the floor for nominations of the chair position for the biennial budget 25-27 budget cycle.
All
And
right.
just a little note, committee members, please refrain from voting on the nominations until all nominations have been made and accepted or declined. So.
Okay, I will open the floor. Do we have any nominations for chair?
I nominate Katie Strode.
Second.
Do we have any other nominations? I do accept, but do we have any other nominations also? Okay, hearing none. Let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion passes. I will remain the chair for the Budget Committee. Now let's open the floor for vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair?
I would nominate Lana, but she's not here to say that she'd accept or not.
Can you do that though? I mean, she knows she'll accept it, so she'll call it.
That's pretty clever, man.
I second that nomination.
Do we want to table it until?
I
later in the
nominate
meeting?
Matt.
I second the nomination for Matt. Matt, do you accept?
Sure.
Okay. Do we have any other nominations? Okay, do we have an official nomination for Lana, or we're tabling that because she's not here?
I'll withdraw my nomination.
Okay,
She'll be fine with that.
all right. So let's take a vote for nominating Matt for vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, Matt is now vice chair.
By the way, if you don't have your mics on, the people in the public can't hear us.
Okay,
Green is when your mic.
For some of them.
all right. we'll
They
move
already
on.
have a hard time hearing us with these mics anyway, so.
We'll move on to public comment. Tonight's meeting will be a working and listening session with department director presentations. We will have time for general public comment at the beginning of the meeting. If you wish to speak, please fill out public comment form and give it to the finance director. The committee chair will recognize those persons wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the committee chair. Towards the end of tonight's meeting or at next Thursday's meeting, we will have a public hearing on state shared revenue with time for public comment on the use of shared revenues. I would like to ask David Bodway, the city's finance director, if we have received any public comments.
I have not received any, and anybody in the crowd would like to give public testimony? No?
Okay, I will close the public comment. And now we'll move on to new business, as we have a number of items to cover tonight, and I will now turn it over to the city manager, Craig Sheldon.
Thank you. Mayor, City Council, members, Budget Committee, and citizens of Sherwood. We're proud to present Sherwood's first biennial budget, 25 through 27, marking a strategic shift towards longer-term financial planning and service delivery. This budget did have challenges in the financial landscape world of budgeting. Budget planning occurred during inflation, slowing development activities and declining revenues. That's including photo enforcement, state shared revenues, franchise fees, as well as private development. A rising cost with employees' total compensation package, materials and services, general liability insurance, property insurance, as well as infrastructure. The total biennial budget is $263.7 million. The budget's balanced in accordance with Oregon law. It meets all city financial policies, including maintaining a minimum of 20% ending fund balance in the 5-year forecast. A little bit of a budget overview, rounding up, the general fund total is $40.5 million. The enterprise fund, which is the water, sanitary, storm, broadband, is $51.6 million. Total all funds expenditures is $106.8 million. Despite financial challenges, the budget preserves core services, advances city goals, and ensures long-term financial sustainability. Reflects a disciplined, forward-looking approach while maintaining flexibility to respond to economic changes. Includes strategic reduction in staffing, materials, and service. Personnel services is $49.9 million, which the general fund is $34.3 million of that. Materials and services, $26.5 million. Capital outlays, $21.2 million, and debt service is $7.1 million. We did have staffing reductions during this budget cycle, reduction of 8 FTEs out of the general fund, bringing the total to 137 FTEs for the city. Our general fund staffing reduced from 97.7 FTEs to 87.3 FTEs, aligning with sustainable spending levels. Current staffing levels are comparable to the FY 2016-2017 budget with 87.5 FTEs in the general fund. We do expect service level impacts in some departments. Additional savings were also made through materials and services reductions. Additional staffing, we actually have an addition of 1 community engagement coordinator in this budget, funded through multiple funds to advance the city goal of improved citizen engagement. This position is being funded through several funds, like I mentioned. Again, this year, several departments requested additional staffing, but these positions were not included in the budget, as many did not make it through the first round of approvals due to the general fund shortfall. COLA that's in this budget is 2.8%. Cost of living applied to employee salaries. We are asking for one-time general fund expenditures funded by reserves and non-reoccurring revenues, which meets our city financial policy of retaining 20%. Rate increases for each year of this budget. Water fund, 2% residential, 3% commercial increase, which is per our financial plan. Sanitary fund, 2% residential, 5% commercial increase. Storm fund, 2% residential, 2% commercial increase. Street fees, 2% increase, and that consists of the street maintenance fee, street light fee, sidewalk fee, and safe sidewalks. There will be some additional business license fee increases in this budget, as well as some building permit fee increases. City goals are aligned with the council's just approved our city goals for this next year, and they're aligned with economic development, infrastructure, livability and workability, public safety, fiscal responsibility, and citizen engagement. Also this evening, we'll spend some time reviewing the 5-year forecast for the general fund with a focus on historical performances, general fund ending balance forecast, and why we have a 20% contingency. Now I'll turn it over to David unless any of you have any questions for me. One thing I will add to that is staff worked really hard on this budget just because I'm standing up here. That's why I had the we at the beginning. Senior leadership, you have some people that have on leadership that probably haven't gone through this process of reduction of staff before. So I'm sure it wasn't the finest thing to do in their jobs, right? And I just appreciate not only the senior leadership, but our management team in the city, because it's senior leaderships, it's other people that work on this budget. So I just want to thank them for going through this, and really our finance team, thank them for putting all that information together to get here tonight. So, David?
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about the 5-year forecast for the general fund. Everyone should have a little packet in front of them. I'm going to pull it up on the screen for everyone sitting in the crowd and for folks at home. Just got to toggle between. All right. So if you could turn to the first page of the 5-year forecast, label page 1. So just, let me just get to that. This is just kind of a recap of where we've been, where we're going, history of the general fund performance and proposed 25-27 forecast. We've had 18 years where we met the financial goals, that 20% general fund reserve goal. 10 of those years we've exceeded 30%. 2 of those years 40%. You know, now the 40%, those are right around the COVID times. There's a lot of federal money, a lot of federal dollars that were pouring to municipalities. So that's one of the reasons why we started getting those higher balances. So one of the questions I receive a lot is why 20%? Why do you have a 20% general fund reserve policy or goal? It was interesting when I was looking at another city in the Washington County area, they also strive for a 20% ending balance in the general fund. So we're not out of the ordinary when we look at that policy. But when you look at the reserves, so that 20% represents a little over $4.8 million fund balance at the end of 5 years. There's 2 parts to this fund balance. For the next 5 years, Fleet, Parks, and Facilities have identified almost $1.7 million in asset replacement or equipment replacement, whether those be police vehicles or parks, lawnmowers. Those have been identified. So there's part of that ending fund balance, that 20%, that's really committed to those asset replacements. Because one thing that cities or municipalities can do is they can defer maintenance. If you defer it too long, you start running into issues down the road where those dollars add up. And a former organization I worked for, we had that issue where they kept deferring maintenance, and then they realized they almost had a $50 million problem on their hand. So that's one thing I've always appreciated about the city and working for the city is they don't like to defer their maintenance, so it's not ever an issue. You know, there are some larger projects beyond the 5 years that we're keeping our eye on that are kind of larger asset replacement, whether it's some of the parks or some roofs that we got to replace. So those will be some challenges in year 6 or 7. But then also...
Wait, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Is the 1.7 million not in the budget?
It is in the 5-year forecast.
But it's not in the budget that's being, the 2-year budget that's being presented?
Not all of it's in the 2-year budget. No, this is asset replacements on year 3, 4, and 5 as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then also...
So hold on, so years 1 and 2 are in the budget.
Yes.
It's just the portion of that is 3, 4, and 5 is not.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, because this budget is only for the first 2 years. It's in the forecast, though.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And all these asset replacements over the next 5 years are in the forecast, are built into the forecast.
Okay, now that leads to another question then. So if it's in the forecast, wouldn't it be part of the 80%? Why does it have to be counted in the 20% contingency? Wouldn't you just spend the money after we get the tax returns in November instead of before? I understand why you need the other 3.2 million in reserve because of the timing of when revenue comes in.
Mm-hmm.
But this, I don't quite understand why we have to make this as part of the 20% contingency if we're already planning and forecasting for it.
I think our assets are usually out of the reserve balance. They're not in the normal budget.
We use, the one thing we ask every year is we ask the budget committee, can we use that carryover fund balance for one-time expenses? And that's what this is.
So it's not in the forecast?
It is.
It is built in.
I mean, it's either forecasted to be spent or it's not. And if it's forecasted to be spent, you don't need to consider it as part of reserves. Wouldn't
I think he's saying it's forecast to be spent out of the reserves,
Yeah.
not out of,
Not-
above the line, not below the line.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the second part of this, I know a few folks have brought this up during the budget committee meetings, is one of the major sources of revenue for the general fund is property taxes. Those property taxes do not come in until November, and so we basically deficit spend in the general fund. Even though we have pooled accounts, we don't like to spend other funds' money, or it's not really a loan, but then that kind of hampers the interest earnings those funds could achieve if they were whole. So we do utilize that reserve for that deficit spending. And just to kind of give you an idea, for this current fiscal year we're in, from July 1st to November 1st, we had a deficit of $3.2 million. Now, having that healthy general fund reserve helps to get us through November until those tax rolls come in.
So by that, you're saying having that 20% reserve, part of that 20% is needed just for cash flow.
Yes.
But then it gets replenished.
Well, it gets replenished in November, but I just want to emphasize that because we call this a reserve, but there's really two components. One of it is just protecting the cash flow until revenues come in November. So in my mind, that's not even a reserve. That's committed operating revenue. And then the piece above that, the 1.6, is that would be your true reserve, emergency reserve, and we're choosing to spend that on assets.
Yeah.
So we don't have to spend more later by not filling with maintenance.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? Or Nancy?
So are we basically saying that the reserve,
Can you turn your mic on?
maybe not.
Push it hard.
So what we're really saying is the reserve is a piece that allows us to have a robust budget and not worry on a month-to-month basis where the next penny's coming from, because we always have a reserve, correct?
I would say it's slightly different. In this way, I personally don't like the term reserve because it implies it's extra.
Right. And
Right.
that's what I'm trying to get away from.
Yeah.
It's not extra.
If we didn't have the reserve, we would not have money unless we wanted to take out loans
Exactly.
to pay our cash flow till November. Yeah.
Right, and I hope the listening audience understands that this is not a council that's had to borrow much,
Right.
because we've been able to borrow from ourselves.
Or we've had the funds to get us till property tax, not borrow, but we
Right,
have
right,
them.
but I'm saying,
Yeah.
when you get into, in January, when you need to borrow, or you need extra money for a project, you don't have to go outside to borrow. You have that money within this big, beautiful budget.
Right, but so, but when it gets replenished, don't we, it seems like it would build up more over time. I know we spend it on some assets, but we don't save any of it as a reserve?
I mean,
If it's just
we're slowly, if you were to look at the budget book, we're slowly dwindling down that general fund balance each and every fiscal year.
As our expenses do this and our revenues.
Yeah, the problem in the general fund, and I've mentioned this, and I'll just say it publicly, the general fund is pretty much about tapped with what it can handle. Expense-wise, any new projects, we're kind of to that point now where, you have revenues growing like property taxes. That's a major source of revenue. They're guaranteed at that 3%, and we have a little bit of growth in there. But when you have, for example, like health insurance costs going up anywhere between 9 to 13%, or property insurance costs averaging 15, 20%, they're outpacing that revenue. So that general fund balance is slowly getting chipped away at.
Yeah,
And if it wasn't for COVID, all that federal dollars, we'd have probably been having this discussion a few years prior.
Yeah, and
To be
just
honest.
A little history, back in 2018, we made a similar forecast. We saw that we were going to go below 20 in 5 years. Some of you were around here for that. And we made a similar adjustment, and hoping that would get us 5 years. And to David's point, we had some one-time stuff that came in related to CARES money and ARPA money with COVID.
Yeah.
That got us an extra 2 years, and here we are today.
Yeah, and this is kind of a culmination of factors where a few things hit it all at one time, where there's a lot of uncertainty in the worldwide economy, whether trade wars, tariffs, where it has really affected our industrial growth here, where a lot of companies are pulling back. They're waiting to see. They don't know what tomorrow could bring. But then also additionally, I know it's a behavior modification. That's our goal of the camera system. But, you know, once those systems came back online, our red light cameras, the revenue is just not there like it used to be. There was a new design to the Roy Rogers 12th and Sherwood where that right turn only is a yield now, which before about 25% of the revenue or the ticketable offenses over there were right turn infractions. Well, those kind of chipped away at those dollars. And so, yeah, it was kind of multiple things all hitting at one time where the cameras just came back up online in November. Now we're starting to see that money's not coming back. So, and now you put all the trade war and the tariffs in there and the kind of the pulling back of the industrial growth. You know, it just kind of made things come together all at once.
Could I just clarify? I just
Yeah.
want to amplify something you said, and Craig, maybe you can shed some light. When we talk about red light camera revenue, there's a perception out there that all of that money just goes to our bottom line and we can spend it any way we want. We have to pay police officers to review that red tape. We have our court system. That eats up a pretty big chunk of that money. So
Yeah.
when we talk about reductions in revenue there, and Craig, back me up, I think that's part of where you made reductions
It
in
is.
staff.
It is.
And the company that manages that takes a pretty healthy.
As does the state and the county, right?
Yeah.
It's their fair share of every.
Yep. But yeah, as the mayor was saying, we did make a 1.5 reduction in the courts, which, you know, you have to align staffing with the volume and the revenue. And like I said, the volume and revenue is just not there anymore. So,
Which, in the big picture, that's a good thing. Behaviors changed, we made some improvements.
Yeah.
Got rid of that red light, that right turn.
Yep.
It was
Yeah,
problematic.
the yield is much better, so, yeah.
Yeah, I would just say from David, we got reduced in court 1.5 position as well as in the PD. We reduced a half of a part-time position that actually was an officer that come in and reviewed the tickets, so.
And that was a contract position,
That was a
right?
contracted position, yeah.
So none of our sworn officers,
Nope.
none of our,
No,
yeah.
there'll be some that pick up the responsibility, but that wasn't one of the sworn officers.
Matt.
So, actually, this is really helpful, because I like to think of reserves in terms of time and not in terms of dollars. And one question that this raises for me is if we had a significant financial disruption at the beginning of September, how much runway would we have to adjust and you know, to be able, how much time would we have to make decisions to correct for and that might be a bigger question for later
It's something
on,
I could analyze and just get back to the committee on, but that's a great question because, you know, it depends on the size of the disruption to where decisions might have to be made quickly here. Decisions had to be made pretty quickly because, you know, we do have a time commitment for the budget, but once we started getting all the numbers together, I started noticing trends were not where they used to be, and you know, and that's when it was kind of, we started looking at everything, but yeah, I can analyze that and get back to you.
No, just out of, you know, unfortunately I have some experience with unplanned financial disruptions, and having a little more runway can sometimes allow you to make constructive long-term decisions rather than immediate,
And I know
possibly not as constructive decisions.
one thing the city manager has talked about, which I think would be a good thing to implement, is us doing projections multiple times throughout the year, fall, mid-year, even in spring. So that's really where you can analyze to say, okay, are these revenues or is these expenditures coming in higher than expected? Are the revenues coming in lower? So you can make adjustments versus, you know, waiting once or twice a year to make those adjustments. It could be more, you can adjust as the information comes in.
Can I ask a question too? On some of the other revenues that have gone down that you're seeing, like I know state share revenues have gone down for everybody. Are you going to cover that in the forecast on? all those
I
lines
am, but
jumping
we
ahead.
could cover that now, where, state shared revenues, but I'll let you finish your comment and then I can talk about it.
No, I just was looking at some of the layoffs on here. There was a chunk from community development. Is that just because there's less development on the horizon also in Sherwood?
Yep. Yeah. So those, besides, when we're looking at the kind of the two areas in the general fund, I mean, there's more than just what I'm going to talk about, but you had like the red light photo camera, that revenue is lower. Thus, there are some layoffs in that department. Community development, a lot of the industrial growth is slowed down. Now, housing is remaining, it's going to be remaining consistent. In talking to the community development director, it's going to be consistent for the foreseeable future. But when you're talking 70, 75 homes versus a $14, $15 million industrial building, and most of those industrial, that growth is occurring in the URA, which one thing I want to stress is not additional tax to individuals. I don't pay an additional tax for the URA being there. So I don't want people to think that's some kind of additional tax. But a lot of that growth is within the URA boundaries. But state shared revenue, yes, that is lower. When you look at like the liquor tax, that is lower because of that facility they built. I think they underestimated the cost, whereas originally 50, 60 million, it turned out to be about $150 million. So we're going to have that impact for a few years. Another thing that surprised me is like franchise fees in some of those larger ones. Climate change is impacting those franchise fees, where we're having warmer winters, which now folks are using less Northwest Natural, less gas, which now those franchise fees are lower. And I did notice when we were projecting out this current fiscal year, I even had Craig get in touch with them, like these are not trending right with what they say their increases were. We had a warmer winter. So climate change is impacting some of those, whether it's PGE or Northwest Natural. So.
Well, in our success with Sherwood Broadband, some of our fees with telecom providers, franchise fees have gone down.
Yeah, and a lot of folks are cutting the cable cord, and so all of our television franchise fees, cable franchise fees, those are going down and declining. Cigarette tax, those are declining. So it's just all around. We're seeing certain pots of money that are declining.
Yeah, no, this is very helpful. I think it's good for the committee to hear all of the different types of revenues that we're seeing kind of more on a decline in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yep.
And it also, you mentioned this in your opening remarks, I think, Craig, where you said our staffing levels are at the same level as they were 10 years ago.
Just about, when you look back through budget books, yeah, we were right around that in the general fund part of it, right?
Okay.
So,
Interesting.
just a comment on the community development, the reduction in staff there. Yes, we did reduce staff there. One of the positions was a commercial examiner that's been on the books for a couple of years now, since TEA started going in off of Oregon Street, that we haven't been able to fill the position. So it's actually in the contracted services. So they really were just using contracted services because we couldn't fill the position. And then the other position's a code compliance position that's going back to the police department, which is where code compliance was in the early 2019, 20, 2021, something like that. So they did lose a planning coordinator out of those. So that, they're all good positions. They're all, we use those positions, but in reality, one of them we didn't even have. So.
Yeah, that's helpful.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Any other questions before I move on? All right, so let's go to page 2. And this is for folks that have been on the committee before. You're going to hear me say this message kind of again. But it's more for the folks in the crowd and the folks maybe listening at home. We've had a long track record of exceeding expectations. We've worked diligently for the past 16 years to maintain positive general fund balance. We do prepare a conservative forecast, which is not a bad thing when you run into situations where pots of revenue are down. We do have those reserves. What is a conservative forecast? It underestimates revenue, but it builds in a layer of contingencies for expenditures. It does make it more challenging to balance the budget. I think when we started the process, we had a budget shortfall or unbalanced budget. You might have heard me say, but it's really kind of like a budget shortfall of just about $2.5 to $2.6 million. Yeah, and so originally from there, what we did is we looked at materials and services. Okay, what can we cut out of everyone's budget in the general fund? We were able to cut out about $1.7 million, which is very lean. And I know Craig and I, the city manager and I have talked to where, we got to be careful. What if something major happens where, I don't know, I'm just saying a roof collapses or something where we have to fix something. So I built in a little bit extra in contingency in the general fund, just that we're able to address the situation if it occurs. We also do what GFOA calls a hybrid model of forecasting. And this allows to capture the expertise, like Craig was saying. We do a collaborative budgeting process. So we rely on all the directors who are the experts in their businesses to provide us feedback, to provide us information, so we can put this budget all together.
Question on that. Can we call it a conservative budget or forecast if we're just ending up, barely covering it? I mean, like we're the first budget meeting I came to 2 years ago or so, 2 or 3 years ago, it was, we had more growth than we were expecting and all the other stuff versus now it feels like we are having less revenue in all areas. We just talked about it a minute ago. We're having more expenses. And so is this still what we would call conservative, or do we need to cut more or whatever to make it so that, we can absorb more bumps in the road?
When I get to the following pages, we'll go over my assumptions. You'll see where revenue assumptions are a little bit lower than what we have been, but expenditures assumptions are higher as well, and I'll kind of walk through that. So yeah, I would still say it's still a conservative forecast.
Okay.
And I think some of the revenues that you talked about that are declining, I think those are pretty hard to predict.
Yeah.
I don't think you could have predicted the state share revenue going down, and some of the franchise fees are really hard to predict from a year-to-year basis, other than what's an ongoing trend.
Yeah.
And the cameras, I knew that the city knew that there was going to be some construction there, but it's really hard to know what the impact is going to be until you're in it.
Yeah.
So some of those are really hard to project on a 5-year forecast basis.
Exactly. And, there's certain pots of money, and this goes back to kind of that 20% reserve. Not only do we have property taxes that come in November, but let's say franchise fees. I think PG comes in January or February, once a year. Same with Northwest Natural Gas, once a year. State shared revenue on a quarterly basis. So it's not like this money's coming in monthly, so we got to have that, I don't want to say reserve, but that cushion, so we're allowed to float, basically.
The good news is, just for context, having worked with a lot of cities outside of Oregon where they have sales tax funding cities, very difficult to predict because a downturn can cause significant churn in revenue. We're rather lucky that we have a consistent 3% bump a year.
Yeah.
It's not a lot, doesn't meet our expenses, but at least it's predictable.
Yeah. Okay, so page 3, this is just a little bit of a recap. It shows the major categories of general fund revenue, and it kind of just, it's more to the point I was trying to make, where you see a majority of the revenue is property taxes. Franchise fees is the second largest bucket, and what we just talked about, franchise fees are down. Intergovernmental revenue, that's state shared revenue. I know we're really watching with Washington County and WCCLS, in terms of library, kind of the money we receive from them. So some of our bucket, but then, intergovernmental charges for services, fines, interest, and other fines. That's where our traffic cameras are. So I just want to kind of show you the major categories of revenue, and it kind of just adds to the point I was trying to make.
I was just curious, for where we are collecting pass-throughs, like Clean Water Services SDCs or Clean Water Services fees on our utility bill, is that counted in the revenue, or
No, if it's money we're collecting and just pass it on, when we get the money, the portion that's our revenue, we record as revenue. The portion that's not, we book as a liability because we owe that to someone. So. And I want to stress, because we're moving to a biennial budget, this is 2 years worth of data. This is not just a single year. I wish it could be a single year, but.
Are you not enjoying the biennial budget, David?
Oh, no, no.
Oh, you
I
wish
just-
that could be our income for 1 year?
Yeah,
Okay.
we would not have any issues, but,
Yes.
so,
Can I say one more thing on the 5-year budget, because we didn't mention it, and just for the public listening? The reason we fix it now, not in 5 years when we get to 20%, because if we save $1 today, that's $5 that we would have to, if we didn't do it, it would be $5 we have to save. in
Yeah.
5 years.
and that was one of the challenging things when we cut out all the materials and services. What was left was personnel costs. And those are the ones that are consistent throughout the year and touch that 5-year forecast every year. So it was unfortunate, but it had to be done so we could meet our financial goals here at the city. So let's talk a little bit about property tax growth, history, 5-year growth assumptions. From fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25, we saw just about a 6% growth. Got to remember, 3% of that's already assumed in there. So really, it was about 2.98% growth. Most of that, though, this is citywide. Most of that was in the URA. The actual non-URA assessed properties, we saw new construction growth that added about 1.3% to our assessed value. Now, when you look at and this forecast factors in an average growth of 1.06 over the next 5 years. So minimal growth, even though housing is staying sustained. Talking with Eric, the community development director, we're going to average probably about 75 homes, but that impact each and every year is not going to be the same as the year prior, because as your assessed value gets bigger, those 75 homes are not going to have the big impact as they did the year before. So slowly that growth was ramping down to averages to be 1.06 over the 5 years. Traffic fines we've discussed already. I did mention that by the makeup or the design of the intersection, we about 25% less in ticketable offenses over there for the right turn only. I can't really look at past history because now the system just got up and running for the first time in November, so now we get to see the numbers. So I kind of threw out all past assumptions because we did have years where construction activity where the system was completely down, so we were receiving maybe about $1 million. It's never going to get up to the levels it used to be. I'm just not seeing the trend. I get the daily deposits. I look at those, and the money's just not coming in. So I had to reset the bar, and you're talking about a $400,000 to $500,000 decline in revenue a year by resetting this bar. But I did factor in a little bit of growth, talking very minimal, 1.6%, which is not much money when you factor that in over 5 years. All right, so a little bit, Taylor, this kind of addressed a little bit of your your previous question. So other major revenue category and assumptions, franchise fees, we're seeing those declining. You know, even though the past 5 years we saw 7%, a little over 7% growth, this 5-year forecast only factors in a 6.75% growth, slowly declining. You know, it does seem like the winters are getting warmer around here. You know, less folks using gas during the winter. And, you know, even though the summers are getting warmer, PGE was a little bit lower than what I expected it to be even this year as well.
It must not be because of our bills getting higher.
Yeah. I know the rates are increasing. We're just not seeing the impact. Intergovernmental revenue. Oh, go ahead.
Are those fees, and this might be a non-pertinent question, but so is it are the fees based on the revenue that people pay or the units of gas and electricity that people use?
It's based off revenue.
It's 5% of revenue.
Okay. Well, then that's good. I mean, that's good at least that
Yeah.
it scales when there's price change gets captured too, not just.
With all the
these
increases, I thought that it would actually be up a little bit, but it wasn't.
That's interesting.
So just real quick, we have a text from an audience member, or from a viewer at home, I should say, that we're having a hard time hearing people. So please make sure that you speak into your microphones and pull them closer. Thank you.
So intergovernmental revenue, that's another major source of revenue for the general fund. That really comes in the form of if we're getting any kind of grants. This is state shared revenue, which Katie and I were just previously talking about. Also WCCLS, and this deals with the library levy that the library we receive from Washington County. Average growth has been 4.3%. This forecast factors in 3.83%. There's a little bit of an unknown here in a couple of years, because I think in Washington County, they're looking to re-up that levy for WCCLS, and that's going to be up to the voters to decide that. So
this is sort of showing where your conservativeness is coming in. Like
Yeah.
you could have said, oh, let's just do 4.3, but
Yeah.
we're not sure, so we're gonna.
we're not sure, and with even state shared revenue declining, I think I'd be aggressive if I did the 4.3%, which then I wouldn't want to have to be having another discussion in
That's
2
a good-
years
yeah.
for the next biennium of potential cuts. So just trying to mitigate, as the mayor was saying, $1 problem now, 5 years could be $100 problem. So charges for services, some of this is another major source of revenue. Really, this is in the community development, building permits, review, project plan review. There is some facility rentals in there, class fees for the art center. We've seen an average growth of 3.63%. I really went conservative here of less than 2% just because of the building activity and everything that's going on with the trade wars and the tariffs. This could be for the next 3 to 4 years. So,
Oh, yeah, I got it to work by breathing into it. So help me understand this really quick. Because I don't understand the role. I know that, just if you could just briefly explain, we hired or created a new community development manager? Is that the title that I'm looking at? Eric,
Economic development.
Economic Development Manager. This category with charges of service, does that fall in that department or under that individual?
that individual is not charged with the community development. There's the Economic Development Fund, and then there's also the 2021 urban renewal, which we're trying to attract businesses, because when we actually get to the urban renewal, we're going to talk about a little bit about the road we're building that will open up that activity. Is that what you're referring to? Kind of basically?
No, I just wanted to know where this was. You did answer the question.
Okay.
The reduction and then the hiring, I wanted to make sure they were not in the same area.
Oh, and the hire, yeah, and the hiring was for.
Does that make sense? We hired something and then we're having a decline here. I'm just
No,
crossed.
it's not in that same fund.
Okay. And then the outside community development or economic development manager with Bruce being gone, that position is not to be filled and not going
No, it's been.
It's currently filled.
That's his position.
Did we change title or am I just wrong on that? Same title?
Title.
The overlap?
I think
They were here
you're-
at the same
I
time,
think
weren't
you
they?
were talking about the communications and engagement person we were speaking of. That's the only hire.
Okay.
New position, which is going to be shared throughout several funds
And what
to
is
be
that?
supported. Communications and engagement. So it's basically, we don't have any sort of a official PIO or anyone who is going to help with the website and making sure that we're engaging people in the community. It's going to help with some of every department, hopefully, and be spread out through amongst different funds.
It's not my place to ask what that role is and what it brings to the table. I'm just holistically looking at cutting staff
Right.
and bringing staff on, just balance it.
Yep.
Done my whole life, but just kind of curious
Yep.
to know what this person's intended and what they're bringing to the community and what the loss is on the other
Right.
side there.
And this was one.
We wouldn't call it a loss, we would call taking job duties and adding them on to existing members of the city, so, thank you.
And this was one position that it was titled a little differently. I say about 2 years ago. It was approved through the budget process. Then we pulled this position off the market to really look at, okay, what do we exactly want this position to do? And so a decision was made, and that's why now it's really communication engagement. And as Kristen was saying, I've been guilty of this. During budget season, I don't have time to sit there and advertise certain things, or I might forget about something. This position is going to help finance out quite a bit.
And
So.
it looks like it's partially funded through broadband.
Yeah, so there's multiple funds that are actually funding this. This is only 25% general funded. So, yeah, broadband's going to utilize them for the marketing, try to get folks to sign up for broadband. I think the water fund, sewer, all the enterprise funds, whether it's water, storm, sewer, discussion on projects that are going out. We're trying to just have a kind of a more consistent, one voice, kind of a consistent message that goes out, kind of like the police department does with their information officer.
If you think about the way that we communicate through social media and other means across the city historically, it's very much department by department. Everybody kind of does their own thing. There's not really a unified style, brand, mechanism of communication, all of those things, right? So this was something we've talked about in council for a while about we need to have a centralized kind of center of excellence where a person can kind of own that whole process, and the other people, the other departments can just utilize their knowledge and experience and expertise and templates and all those things, if you will, right? So it should actually, ideally, be more efficient for all these departments, so that everyone doesn't have their own process, their own system, their own comms. Everyone just, okay, I need to send a press release, send it over to this person. They do all the press releases for the city, and then we're also sending a very much more consistent branding and experience message to the community.
I'd agree. Yeah.
I have a question. I was just gonna ask about the microphone situation. I'm wondering if Craig and Kristen can share one so that Lana can have one, and Brian, because they're sharing amongst three, and Lana went to talk and she had no mic, so, yeah. Does that work?
It's all good.
Craig, yeah.
Oh, please, go ahead. I woke up, so I'm ready to
No,
go.
you're okay. So, I know that when you make cuts, it's never easy.
That's not.
And especially with the size of city that we have. And I know that you're trying to be conservative so that there aren't any other future cuts. But do we need to be concerned about that when we look at the budget? Do you anticipate future cuts? If so, where are you thinking that, it might come from? Or, I know I might have missed some of that conversation, but.
This is something, you might have missed this part of the conversation where the city manager wants to implement more on a regular basis, us doing projections throughout the year, not just maybe once a year, budget season wise. Now that we're on a biennial budget, we're not going to be preparing a budget next spring. So we're going to have to be consistently reviewing our budgets, reviewing the revenue that's coming in the door, reviewing our expenditures, and really be looking to see if there's any or anything out of the ordinary that we need to be concerned about. So yeah, this is something we're gonna have to analyze on a consistent basis, and we're gonna have to address it when it occurs. I mean, there's so much uncertainty right now where I don't know if anybody can predict what's going on in the world economy. Day after day, something changes. So we're just gonna kind of have to adjust and be a little flexible here, but this is something we're gonna have to monitor, because in 2 years, we don't want to be having the same conversation again.
Okay.
And Lana, you might have missed, I can't remember when you came in, but part of the original conversation was these cuts are to make sure that we're healthy for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you were going is, are we just fixing this year versus are we setting ourselves up for success?
Well, and on that same stream, I'm going to ask a second follow-up while I have the mic. My world's a little bit different, but we are in contract negotiations, so it's probably where I'm thinking. Are there any contract negotiations or anything that might affect the budget or in the next couple of years?
Potentially. Currently, right now, we're in negotiations with SPOA. Next year, next spring, there'll be negotiations with ASHME and the Sergeants Union. So, and then 2 years' time after that, all three of them are going to come together at once. So, yeah, we're.
In that same conservative vein, are we like taking that into account of what, the projections might be so that we don't have any future cuts? I mean, I know you said that you're being conservative, but
I don't know how much we can discuss on contract.
I really don't want to
Yeah,
talk a
and
lot
I
about the
understand
contract
that,
negotiations,
but you are thinking ahead.
we are, but as you can see, we just laid off 8 people
I understand.
and a 20% reserve at 5 years, so there's not a whole lot in this budget
Yeah.
for that, so. And I want to be open and honest about that
Right,
because there
yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there's a 2.8% COLA increase in here for employees, right? That's what's in. Throughout, well, just, that's the first year of this budget.
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
She's got her mic. So, may I ask one more, or make one more statement and a question? So, what is done is done. Layoffs are done. This is done. You know, we're here. My role here as a citizen, and more than ever right now, I couldn't be more serious about looking around the town I'm in, the situation, our growth, et cetera. I know this is the introduction. Will we circle back around to layoffs and things like, well, let me put it differently, meat and potatoes versus dessert? And I'm really disappointed to hear that tonight as a citizen, but I'm sure that I'll feel better about it when we leave here, okay? So we will circle back around. I don't want to ruin the introduction by hijacking it, but that will get.
We do department by department, so as we go through that.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then the next, page 7, just talks a little bit about kind of the major areas expenditures. As the city manager is mentioning in his budget message, one of the biggest expenditures in the general fund is personnel services. Again, this is over 2 years. Materials and services, we had to make a lot of cuts there over this biennium budget, just to help us get the budget balanced, but then also meet the 20% general fund balance goal. And there's only so much in materials and services that we can cut.
David, just for the public's benefit, and maybe it's a question for Craig, could you just kind of talk about what materials and services is? This is more than just pencils. This is like,
yeah, so for example, in public works, for like parks, facilities, it's playground material that they need, or bark chips, or that kind of stuff. Community development could be a variety of things. It could be paper for the plotter. It could be hard hats. It could be for anybody. It's safety equipment, training's in there. There's a variety of things. So
contract services.
to be quite honest, paper and pencils and pens are a small amount of the materials and services. Most of it's infrastructure related, a lot of it.
Yeah.
Police department has stuff in there. Materials and services, their one-time expenses are like their vests that are going to be outdated. That's why they're being rotated out. So there's a variety of things that comes out of materials and services, computers, communication equipment, that kind of stuff. Phones, yeah.
Does this mean that we, instead of buying a lot of them when there was a good price or whatever on it, we have less in reserve and we are going to buy as needed? And so it's kind of, well, if that air conditioner breaks, we don't have the tool on the shelf or the part on the shelf anymore to get it. We now have to go out and get it. It's whatever it costs at the time that it breaks. And so rather than, I mean, is that when you do bark chips, instead of buying all that we need at once, we're doing it piecemeal by what we need that month or whatever?
I would say when they buy playground chips, they're buying a full amount to bring it in and dump it off, and then we're actually putting it in the playground. I think when you get to the HVACs, some of the materials and service there, we do have some parts, but we don't have room to store a variety.
Right, but so when you say you reduce it, does it literally mean we're not buying as, instead of doing 3-year computer replacements, we're doing 4-year?
When we're reducing stuff, we're not buying stuff, is what we're saying in that.
Yeah.
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, like in community development, when we were seeing high demand for permitting and stuff, we had contract services that would do that work for us. So when we see low demand, we don't need that contract service anymore. So
But so now,
Losing anything, you
Yeah.
can't prepay for contract services.
Yeah.
So you're not losing.
so some of it's just because you don't have the demand.
right, but so for now though, if we go high demand on those things, is it just gonna take longer to get them approved, or are we still gonna go out for contract?
Well, if you have more demand coming in, you have more revenue coming in to pay for that extra service.
Right, but this number is down, overall, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you don't have that to go out.
But the contract services that in community development are paid for by the fees that the developer pays. So if we have all of a sudden a bunch of increased applications, we'll have a bunch of increased revenue that will allow us to do a supplementary budget and pay for the services.
Yep.
I think that gets back to some of what David's talking about, projections. And somebody asked, are we worried about the next couple of years? You know, community development, I am concerned about if private development just goes away like it did several years ago. That's why it's so important to do projections. So you're seeing what your revenue is coming in and what you're spending. So if you need to make those changes mid-year or whatever it is, you can make it, right? So, yeah, private development, I have some concerns if it slows down, so.
But you already only budgeted 1.8% growth, or 1.3% growth. It can't slow down much more than that.
But no, it can't. But if people stop doing everything, that's what happened in 2007,
I guess you're right, 'cause
8.
it's growth over baseline,
Yeah.
not growth over zero.
like
Okay, yeah,
2008.
good point.
So,
Well, thank you for that explanation and conversation, because materials and services sound nebulous, so I think it's important that we
yeah,
call that out.
it is.
Yeah, if you were to look at the grand scheme of things, like, you know, pencils and stuff, people might budget maybe $200 in office supplies for a year for their year. It's travel and training, it's contracted services, might be,
Could be sewer pipe.
professional technical, where you're hiring an architect or an engineer, you know, so there's a lot of various categories there. A few of the other categories, capital outlay, transfer out. Now, capital outlay, we're only talking about the general fund here. We're not talking about the enterprise funds that have a lot of those, whether they're $5, $10, $15 million projects. This is just general fund. And really, the general fund, this capital outlay represents whether it's police vehicle replacements, park equipment replacement, some facility maintenance projects, or some updates that they're doing. So that's really capital outlay is just for the general fund departments. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the whole picture of the general fund. I thought this is kind of a good graph just to kind of show you a breakout. You know, some of these departments look a little bit smaller than what they actually are because we do allocate out some of our costs. Of course, administration, we do allocate out some of our costs because we're providing services to all the city, whether that's the water fund or the sewer fund. So we do allocate out some of our costs. Along with Public Works, they do allocate out some of their costs if it pertains to those enterprise funds. But the police department, very important department. They're one of the most expensive, which I think you could say that about any city, but they're very important. They're not an allocated out department, so that's why it shows up as they take up 37% of the general fund expenditures. Okay, so expenditure assumptions. Let's talk a little bit about inflation. I know there's already been an April report out there, but it was quite surprising to see inflation was at 2.39% for March. But there's a lot of uncertainty out there. Whether are we moving towards a recession? Are we not moving towards a recession? Are these tariffs going to be held off for another 30, 60, 90 days? There's just so much uncertainty there. But I do anticipate, and I was a little more conservative, I'm anticipating at least inflation trending around the 3% level over the 5 years. When will inflation hit the Federal Reserve's target level of 2%? There's a lot of debate out there. They're thinking it could hit that in the next few years. I did not want to forecast that just because there's so much uncertainty in the world economy. So that's why, and over the 5 years, I average a 3.16% inflation. PERS contributions. It's a new biennium for the state of Oregon. Every new biennium, the PERS rates get released. And our PERS rates are increasing for tier one, for all three tiers, basically. It's surprising to see tier one and tier two employees are not the most expensive anymore. but they make up a small portion. If you could see down below, they only make up about 16% of our workforce. 71%, 72% of our workforce is what I like to call tier 3 or the OPSRP, general services. But I have to say, this is my, if you were to turn to the next page,
Are those numbers percentages of salary, the 29.39%?
yes, and this does not factor in the 6% employee
Okay.
contribution that the city does, so,
35%.
yeah.
So if you add that plus the 6% that the city covers on the employee basis, and then things like healthcare benefits, et cetera, and payroll tax, what do you think the overall overhead is for an employee? Percentage-wise?
You're in the mid-40s at least, if not around 50%. What's that? I'd say mid-40s, close to 50.
35 on PERS alone.
And you're 7% on payroll tax.
And
gotta
about
be over
roughly
50.
10%, so yeah, you're over 50,
Yeah.
yeah.
We don't have the percentage, but the annual benefit cost per FTE is projected to be 62,000 on page 45 of the budget book.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. And that's a pretty big jump.
Big number.
From 2022.
If you turn to page 10, just talking a little bit about benefits. I've already mentioned this, but just to recap as well. Two of our major medical insurers are Regence and Kaiser. Regence is set to increase by 9% January 1st, and Kaiser at 13% come January 1st. And here, right, the next paragraph below just talks about a little bit about the overall increases. Tier 1 and Tier 2 is increasing by 1.87% for PERS. The OPSRP for general services is 2.43%, and the Tier 3 OPSRP for police is 2.91%. I have to say, this will be my third biennium here with the state. This is the largest increases I've seen since I've been here. So this surprised me as well too, because of course, the state's telling us things are going to start slowing down, flatline, and all of a sudden we receive this kind of increase.
Yeah,
And it had slowed down because it was pretty bad back in the late 2010s.
Yes.
And it had started slowing down and now
Now jump back up, which,
Yeah, 5 years ago, they told us it'd be going down by this point.
yeah. So this one surprised me. I'm always conservative or more aggressive in the expenditures, but this even shocked me as well too. I thought it'd still, okay, we'll probably be about where we were before, but this one, with the way the stock market, I know there's different investment rules down there, you know, how they invest the PERS dollars, but the way the stock market and everything's been performing, I didn't think we'd see this kind of increase, so. We've already talked about the asset replacement plan. Again, this is only asset replacement within the general fund. We're not talking about anything outside the general fund here. So when you look at in 2026, this upcoming, we have about $365,000 in asset replacements, and you can kind of look down the next 5 years. But, you know, one thing we're keeping our eye on, and which is why we're going to be going through projections throughout the year, is come 2031, 2032, there's some large asset replacement identified, I guess I should say, in the plan that, you know, we gotta make sure that we have the funds there to replace those assets.
Hey, can I just say one thing, because I love telling this story, but in some of our funds, because of practices we put back in place in like the 2008 timeframe, like our water fund, we've done a really good job of making sure that we're bringing in enough money to pay for future capital investments that we have to make. And we just finished a major 30% increase in capacity on our water plant, and we didn't have to ask for state money, we didn't have to ask for any money from our constituents or anything. So in some areas, we're doing really, really well on this.
Good deal.
Yeah.
So is one way to address that, though, to say, hey, we're replacing our playground equipment every 5 years. We're tightening our belt. It's got to be every 6 years now or 7 years, right? I mean, is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, so let's just say Snyder Park. You're probably looking at somewhere about $500,000 when that playground, and it's sitting right at the edge of 2030, 31 right there. as well as, the problem is I think that went in about 2025 or 2005. So once playgrounds get about 20 years old, you have a hard time finding parts for them. So it's more than just, so then that's what ended up happening at Murdoch Park years ago, is we couldn't get parts, so we had to close the playground down. So once she gets past about 20 years, it starts adding up, right? And you just don't, you might not be able to get the parts. So that's some of the concerns about the playgrounds. And then you got a 2031 right about there. If we can make it 5 more years, you got a roof at the YMCA. It's about $500,000, 490,000 or so. So when David's talking about big expenses coming, there's some big expenses coming. We've got turf replacement coming, which is not part of this. It's probably 400,000 because we actually bring in money through our rec program for that, and we have saved money for that project. But you have in the next 5-6 years, you've got all the turf fields pretty much, and we're getting a couple extra years out of them because they weren't used during COVID. So when David's talking about some bigger expenses out in 2031, those are the things that are going to come due. So that's what he's talking about.
And so that just adds a little bit more to the point why it's important to have, I don't want to say reserve, my mind keeps going back to the general, why we need that 20%, because there's some large capital replacements down the line.
And I would add, on the other side of the revenue, we are constantly looking for, I call it other people's money, whether that's federal earmarks, state dollars, lottery money. We've got to ask right now in the state for $4 million. I think it's $5 million.
$5 million.
For expansion of the sewer lines out in the Brookman area. So on top of all this, we've had some pretty good success in getting state money for capital projects, state and federal.
I got a question on that. Did any money get retracted?
We have, so far, no. We had the FEMA money got reinstated, correct?
Yeah, there's $45,000 in the fleet budget as we go through this. That was one of the grants that we did receive. We're getting ready to submit for the Brownsfield right now, but it's supposed to go through, but we'll see if it actually goes through and we get reimbursed.
Like
the ones where
that got the $4 million, that got.
For what? I'm sorry?
The cleanup?
The $5 million
That's the $5 million.
Oh, got it.
Yeah.
On that one, because we haven't seen the money yet, we are closely monitoring that with the federal team and our consultants out there, and we're watching it because we are worried about it.
We were supposed to be a part of a thing with Tualatin for some EV chargers, right? And that got yanked.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were supposed to get I want to say 12 chargers, and it's a kind of a metro. Tualatin ran it was about $15 million grant. It's still on hold, and I just talked to him today, so.
But for example, we did receive $3 million for Ice Age Drive when we get to the URA budget. We'll talk a little bit about that. But that all went through the state of Oregon, confirmed through the state of Oregon. There's nothing being pulled back there, so, yeah.
Are you knocking on wood over there?
I was knocking on wood.
Hopefully the mic picked it up, so everybody knows we're all wishing for good luck.
And then the last few assumptions, facility and equipment, a little more aggressive here. Average growth over the past 5 years has been 6.75%. I put in the forecast of growth at 9.6% because even though we've trimmed materials and services the next couple of years, we can't sustain that for 5 years. So that's why I got more aggressive in years 3, 4, and 5. Build that into the forecast because Public Works, there might be some things that have added up that where they need to have those dollars forecasted for them to do replacements or fix it. So I did get a little more aggressive there, just with how much we had to trim. Even with professional and technical on page 11, even though the average 5 years has been 4.6%, I built in almost 7.5%, really getting more aggressive on years 3, 4, and 5, just with how much we've had to trim. Because, like I said, that's not, it's sustainable for a few years, but it can't be sustainable for 5 years. So I thought it was appropriate to get a little more aggressive there. Before we move on to department presentations, I wanted to see if there's any questions on the 5-year forecast, or I don't know if this is something, was that helpful on page 2, or actually page 1, that kind of shows the breakout of the 20% and the asset replacement plan. I didn't know if this is like something to help readers at home, that is something that should be added to, like, say, in the budget message underneath that 5-year forecast, adding a little paragraph and a little bit more information, so folks don't see, why are you laying off all these people? Look at all this money you have. Well, there's reasons for that.
I think we need to stop calling it a reserve.
Yeah.
It's not a reserve. Yeah, I think that's the number one problem.
Yeah.
Again, this may be a dumb question. We've already gone to a 2-year budget. Can we shift our budget year to be closer to November so we don't have to, or can we do a 2-year and 4-month budget?
No.
Okay, all right.
Or count that set by state.
Thought I'd ask state.
Yeah.
Seems like if we could start those clocks at the same time. All right.
But also, just to echo that, just having lived through it a little bit, like part of the reason you want that cushion there and you want to be able to proactively make decisions today is that, you know, if we hit a really significant downturn and there isn't enough money to pay the bills that we have, all of a sudden your options are really limited and you have to potentially make decisions that you wouldn't. You will look back and wish, oh wow, I wish we would have made harder decisions a few years ago rather than being in this position and potentially having to do things we wouldn't want to do.
Yeah.
Craig, remind me if you remember back when the last time there was a real downturn, was that like 2008?
Yeah, that was a housing crisis, right?
As a city, Sherwood survived that, where a lot of our surrounding cities had a bigger struggle, right?
Yeah, we ended up having, we had reduction in staff and somewhere right around there, and it was because of the building and that. But yeah, actually, we probably did a little bit better than some of the other agencies, but we went through it. There was several staff members laid off then too.
Some of our, I won't name names, but some of our surrounding cities in the county chose to use one-time money to fund operations. So they have a much bigger problem right now. The county has significant budget hole to fill, and some of the other cities, again, I won't name them because I have to work with those mayors, but they have much bigger holes they got to fill right now.
David, I think. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Renee. Go ahead.
I believe at the beginning of your message, you were saying that you did some comparison with other cities who had not the reserve, but the reserve.
Yeah.
We don't want to call it that, but that's the only word that I can think of. You said one city had 20%. What were some of the other cities at?
I'll get back to you. I have them notated down, but it was just the city I was looking at because they had just previously moved to binding budget. So I was really looking through all their stuff when I was putting this budget together, and I was reading like, oh, that's interesting. It was actually the same verbiage before we changed it to exactly 20%. It was 15%, but strive for 20%. I'm like, oh, that language sounds very familiar. So, yeah, but I can get back for the next meeting. I can just kind of give you some examples of different contingency, contingencies, or not reserve, but yeah, I can get back to you on that.
Cash
And
flow.
it depends on what their cash flow model looks like too.
Yeah.
I think back to your question though, is I think something like that would be helpful in the budget book with the 5-year forecast. So citizens aren't going to come back and review this. If they want to look at our budget, they're going to go online and look at our budget, right? So having something in there that explains what that ending fund balance.
Which is something during the approval process, once the committee is comfortable with the budget, we can look at making that adjustment. So when I bring it in front of city council in Craig's budget message, we can add that information in there so the adopted budget will actually show that.
Perfect.
So if when we get to the time, if you folks feel that is needed, which I think is important. But all right, so now let's go to this, as Doug would say, the tree that I cut down to print all this stuff. I am going to escape out of here and get to my other presentation.
Yes, we can take a 5-minute break.
Perfect.
before do you have to make that?
City council's first name recorded.
You get that close.
And I only hit like, I think, 5 lights. Just constant. Like, bypass.
I think we should.
Okay, our break is over and we're back in session. I'll turn it over to the first department. Is that city council?
City council, yep.
Yeah, so this is the city council's budget. I would just say, in the highlights, it was nice. At the League of Oregon Cities conference, we had several counselors that actually were able to make that conference. It's nice to see getting some education that way. And then as well as a highlight, I would say this last year for city council, they wanted to start a youth advisory board, which that's kind of moving forward. But the bigger thing is there was 4 youth that went back to DC to the NLC conference, trying to get some traction on kids being on the youth advisory committee next year. And they just delivered a message the other night at council, they had a great time and learned a lot. So that was good to see. So I would say that's probably a couple of the highlights, I would say, on the councils. Of course, no personnel service there. Materials and services, that's some travel training, state of the city events on there. There's different things that relate to League of Oregon Cities that's in this budget, NLC. When we go back to DC to lobby for money, which we've been very successful at over the last few years, the mayor goes back there. I usually go back, or the past city manager has gone back. So that's really what that money is. There's not a lot there's some dues in there for the League of Oregon Cities, but I think there's candy for the parade in there. I think that's where some of the meals come from out of that budget. So that's really where that $57,000 comes from. So that's really, any questions on the city council budget?
No question, but just like everyone to note that there's 0 personnel expenses. City council does not receive any compensation for our
Volunteers.
Some of the stuff Sylvia does is in this budget for council as well. So like the meals and stuff, so.
A point on that, we only get meals when there's a 4-hour meeting block.
We try to make it that way, right?
And they're not extravagant, but they're well done. Good job, Sylvia.
And appreciate it.
Oh, yes, thank you. Yep. Thank you for the record, Sylvia Murphy. I'm the city recorder here at the city. My budget is a very small budget. Not a lot of changes this year, primarily 2 areas. My budget is all general fund. One area that did change was we reduced the election line from $25,000. Historically, we've had $25,000 budgeted every year, anticipating an election of some kind. General elections in November of an even number year, there's no cost to the city, so the $25,000 was for just in case there was an initiative or something else. So we decided to remove that from the budget, and if in fact we did have an election filed, we would just do a supplemental budget. So that item is not budgeted this year. The other change to my department was affected by the layoffs. So we had a 0.5 FTE. It was a records management coordinator position that was not included in this next budget. Other than that, not a lot of changes. Personnel services, like I said, pretty much remain the same. There's a little bit of a change. This year, you will see in the schedule of employees, I had a vacated position of a records tech. a 30-hour position. That individual took another job here at the city in another department, so which vacated that position. So what we did here at the city and working with the city manager was we looked at the best value for the department, and we decided to do a deputy city recorder. So that deputy city recorder is also part-time, 30-hour. We haven't filled that yet. We're kind of waiting to get through this budget process, but if that's something that's approved, obviously through the budget, then we'll look to have that position filled. Yep.
Sounds like success planning,
Yes, looking forward to it.
session planning.
So can I ask a question? For the personnel services, it doesn't look like it's much of a decrease because of the reduction from the records management. Is that because of the deputy city recorder?
Yeah, the deputy
Okay.
recorder is I believe it's one class up, so it's a difference in classification, not by much, but the position that was vacated was a 30-hour, the deputy's a 30-hour, so it's not quite a wash. So the other position that was a part of the layoff was a 0.5 FTE.
Okay, so your department still went down 0.5?
No, it's still, yes, it
It's
did.
still- okay.
Yes, it did, yes.
Got it.
Yep. Hi, Mayor.
Thank you. You mentioned your entire budget's in the general fund. I was just curious, like, on the record management side, when you're doing record management for like Public Works or some of the other fund, is there a treatment there to assign your services out to those departments?
We had looked at that several years ago, and actually we did. There was, I believe, like a 0.5 of the recorder was allocated to the urban renewal, simply because I also service the urban renewal committee. So, and then a few years back, I can't say it was 5 or 7 years prior, a finance director, I don't know if it was decided this isn't worth it, it was like 5%, why are we bothering? And then everything went to general fund. So, but that's a really good question. That was something that we kind of touched a little bit through this process, was allocating, if I am responsible for citywide records, that would include urban renewal and those records of those departments that do get their funding from other funds. So it's something that we can absolutely look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's so small that you're spending more money figuring out what it is, I totally agree, but I just thought I'd ask.
Yep. 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 Let's see here. As far, do you want to get the next one?
Next one is city manager.
No, I was going to look at the goals. So last year, we did have some goals. I just wanted to just update the budget committee. We were successful in managing and reaching some of those goals. There was, last year about this time, I came to the budget committee and said that we were going to do an audit of our human resource department records. We were successful in doing that. We got about halfway through that. The audit, once identifying the records that we had, primarily focused on those that were in archive. Those were the older ones, not only personnel records, but our risk management records, our workers' comp claims. So that audit kind of resulted in, why am I touching it twice? I might as well manage it while I'm here. So we processed a great deal of those records and prepared them for destruction. We identified records that were slotted for digital archiving, so we can digitize those. A lot of the goals for this next year are going to be similar, continuing to work with the human resources records, and then just identifying departments that we can license in our new records management system, the system that we've had for about 5 years now, just kind of slowly licensing a department at a time. So the loss of this position, the 0.5, that individual has spent the last 2.5 years, it's a fairly new position here at the city, working on decommissioning a previous system and then training up on this new record system. So we have a lot of our staff, certain departments that are 100% utilizing the new record system, which is great. Now it's just expanding that to other city departments as well. So that's what we'll be working on this next year.
I saw one of the goals was digitizing the historical city photos and documents. Are those being saved in addition to that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we did accomplish that goal, and we do have the originals as well. Yep. That's all I have. If there's any other questions? You bet.
Thank you. So
Actually, one performance measure in the city manager that I just want to highlight is the employee satisfaction engagement score and evaluation that was done here at the city. My understanding from HR that actually provides this, like 50 is really good. It's like awesome. It's not a 0 to 100. But we were at 11. Last time we did it, we were about 43. We thought, well, I think we'll try to stretch it out, projected 25, 27 when we did this, to 2 years worth of that to try to get it up a little bit. But with everything that's gone on with layoffs, I think a good score would be like about 35 on this both years. Just because when you go through the transition that we've gone through over the last month, those scores are probably not going to be the highest. So that's just one thing I would highlight there. A lot of these in the goals for 25, 27, they tie to this city goals.
So you have 92 though listed.
For
Right.
2 years.
2 years. Because of 2-year budget.
What does the score represent?
Lydia, can you come up and explain it a little better than I can?
So we've had to add both of them?
Yeah.
She can talk about.
She can explain it a little better than I can.
Hi, Lydia McAvoy, HR Director. So for our employee satisfaction, we use Net Promoter Score, and those scores range from -100 to +100. So typically, any score over 30 is considered good. Any score over 50 is excellent. Any score over 80 is best in class. And we're talking about top 1% of the world there. So a score of 30 really is a very positive employee satisfaction score. We do this 4 times a year. So what we're going to do is, for the purposes of the presentation and budgets, is provide you an average of the scores over the previous 2 years or year. This is actually our end of year scores for the previous 2 years. So now we're doing a 2-year budget, we'll average them.
So the average wouldn't be 92 then?
No, the
Divided
average
by
would
2.
not be 92.
So we
Yeah.
should present this differently.
Yeah.
And the 43 is in, it says projected, but I'm assuming that's actuals?
The 43 was an actual. So when we began doing this, our score was 11. Yeah. So it has been a significant improvement. And we've done a lot of work in terms of employee satisfaction surveys and feedback forms, and city manager has personally responded to the feedback that we received from employees. Yeah.
I would propose we should show the biennial projection as an average, not as a
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
and the challenge is, you'll see this in every department, because it's a 2-year budget for the first time. So we literally took year 1 and year 2 and added them together of what are you going to see within 2 years. So it became very challenging because everybody presented their numbers differently. So sometimes,
Something to work on for next time.
yeah, either we show 2 columns or we only show the first year, or whatever we're required to do for the 2 years. But it is confusing. You'll see that in PD because it looks like they're going to have 60 officers when it's year 1 is 30, year 2 is 30.
I noticed that throughout the budget too, when it,
Maybe change the scene.
yeah, when it adds
That's
the
what I
2 beginning fund balances into the 1 column, like, well, we don't have $7 million in that fund and we never will. But,
Exactly.
you know, so it's just a way of learning how to present it that it makes most
Correct.
sense over.
I just want to go back, because I don't think we spent enough time there. We went from an 11 to 43. That is huge. And a big thank you to the staff and Craig and the leadership team, because that's a major turnaround.
It's a really short period of time.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, that, on those screens, you know, this is not what the budget meeting is about. What are some of the factors? Is it
Yeah, I was
change
gonna
in
ask that.
leadership?
Yes.
That's
I
what
think
I
it-
would look at, but I mean, that would.
Brian, I'd have to say it's senior leadership team and the managers. This position, you're here to direct and lead, but when people buy in and you can show results, right? That's the biggest part of it right there. People want to be treated good. And if you say hi to them in the hallway, whatever. I'm just saying you want to take care of the people that work for you, right? So that's probably the biggest, but it's not one individual. It's a team effort. So it's senior leadership and the managers we have.
Craig's not going to take credit, and he's going to give credit to the rest of his team,
Yeah.
which tells you why the score is where it is.
So, but the team has to answer to whatever that culture change is. They have to be responding too. So that it turns back around to what you said. That's a team effort. They have to step. They have to want to do that as well. So that's awesome for everybody.
It is. It's very Mahomes of you.
I brought that one up just because 92 is a lot, right? You're never going to get there, but I think with the transition we're having right now, with the reduction in staff, I think if we can kind of shoot for a 35 in each one of the years, and if we go higher, I think we're doing good. But I think we're probably going to lose some people out of this, right? And just like any company does when it actually happens. So that's why I wanted to bring that one up. That's probably, to me, that's probably one out of all these goals from the city manager. That one is a big number for the senior leadership. When we stepped in the room a year and a half ago or whatever, and that's a great accomplishment for the leadership team.
And it is credit to the entire leadership team, including yourself.
And bigger than that, that you're cultivating this kind of culture and people are feeling good about where they work. I mean, it's a huge thing.
Awesome.
In the future, can you put like an asterisk that tells that 30 is this, and, you know, because people are looking at this online thinking, well, that's not very good, you know, because we're used to 50, 100. We're used to a different scale in life.
Yeah.
And so when you said 30, I thought, ooh, people are not going to get it.
We can certainly do that because the scores begin at a negative 100 and go all the way up to 100. So I think that's great feedback, and we can certainly incorporate that.
Yeah. But we do want to explain
Yes.
what 30 means or what 44 means.
So, thank you for that. And just, the 92, before we finalize this, are we going to get consistent on these numbers and put that to a 41?
I think that we're going to make a few changes before that it actually gets in the act. Lydia brought this to my attention yesterday.
Okay.
We don't need them printed, though.
Yeah, no new paper.
We're not going to print new papers, but when it comes in front of council, I'd like to change that because that's not a goal that you're ever.
We'll call it Scribner error.
The team's not going to meet. So,
I was gonna make just one recommendation on the KPMs. It might actually be helpful to disaggregate those by year, because I think we'll probably be doing at least an annual update. And so knowing, okay, well, you know, we might approve 25 through 27 here as a group, but it would be nice when we meet in 26 to be able to look back at 25, 26 and say, like, where are we at midstream, and do we need to adjust in any way?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Most of these KPMs could be split by year.
Yeah, and I would say, after we get the engagement manager, we gotta look at, is this the right metric for this? Number of Facebook and number of Twitter and X followers, or Instagram? Is that, you know what I mean? Like, is that how we measure it? We talked about Archer and distribution and whether it goes digital, you know.
Yeah.
Let's get together and see what their ideas for a plan of how to measure communication, because we'll also have a new website, right? And so we should be able to see traffic on that and stuff like that.
I would agree.
Okay.
I assume across the other departments, as I look ahead, those KPIs are being kind of set by the department heads. Like, these are the things that which makes sense. I feel like for the city manager one, I feel like council should probably work with senior leadership on what those KPIs should be. These same ones have been on here since I've been on council, and we've never talked about updating them. So it's a good call.
The only thing that I would add is, Lydia, if you're using the Net Promoter Score, or Net Promoter Survey, I don't know where it would fit in there, but actually acknowledge that in there for people who are actually paying attention.
Good suggestion.
Oh, yeah.
Well done.
You're welcome.
Yeah, but it's not even listed. It's not
Or
even
no,
there.
that's what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
if it's written there and you see it, you're like, oh.
The city manager's budget, you got a small increase in personnel service there. That's really myself, Kristen, Tina, and some of the time for the communication coordinator position there. Materials and service is not a big portion of that 159 is, I want to say about 110 or so is for our state and federal lobbyists out of that. That's who we work with to try to get money back here, right, for projects. And then you have some, I think some training in there for us, as well as there's some dues in there. There's a video deal in there for a retainer. Also, Citizen U is a council or a city goal that council would like to start back up. We're looking at doing that in the fall, so we have some money in there for that. And then we have a little bit of money in there for employee appreciation stuff in the city managed budget. And that's really about it out of that. So any questions on that?
I will say the money that we pay for our federal and state lobbyists is the return on investment of that is well worth it. And I will be the first one to admit that when we first started talking about that, I thought, that's a waste of money. I was proven wrong.
Actually, that's a great KPI to add to the previous slide, is dollars returned versus dollars spent on lobbying.
Yeah, because I just added it up.
Divide. We're up to like 22 million
I was
over
gonna
the
say-
last 5 years.
Yeah.
You know,
Like
on
a 10X
100K
probably
per
what we
year
spent.
spending. That's huge.
More than
Yeah.
10x. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's well worth the money.
We'll just double the budget, we'll double our return, right?
There you go.
Try it.
Love to hear that.
You have to guarantee it.
You want to cover this one?
Yeah.
Sebastian's online.
Oh, is he online?
Right
Okay.
there.
I didn't know if he-
I am. Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. I see that I'm next. As most of you know, I'm the interim city attorney. So when I was asked to adjust Ryan's budget, this certainly was a tricky ask. However, by comparing our budget to actuals for the current fiscal year, assistance of David Bodway, as well as consulting with Ryan, we were able to make some significant cuts. And first, in order to just go over the city attorney's goals, this is in addition to managing the daily needs of the city attorney's office. City attorney also will provide contract and procurement training, facilitate public meetings law training as required by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, assist with the successful completion of council priority projects. We currently have a law student who is serving as a law clerk and will continue during the school year at a reduced amount. And I've added some additional goals of strengthening existing skills to reduce the reliance on outside counsel. You'll see that there is a reduction in each of the 3 categories: personnel services, materials and services, and total departmental budget. That is a reduction in training, travel, and materials and services. And I think that is all that I have, unless there are questions.
Is that outside counsel listed under personnel services or materials and services?
Materials and services.
So what are we reducing in the personnel side on that department?
On personnel?
Yeah.
Well, you have to remember, last fiscal year or this current fiscal year, there's still a little bit of Ryan's, our city attorney, his time in there. So there's some doubling up there.
Yes.
There's certain things we have to follow out on certain kind of leaves stuff we're still responsible
Right.
for.
I
So
forgot about
that's the
that.
reason why. So they're not really reducing any FTE. It's just, Ryan will be back here in, I believe, in August, September. And so there's not going to
Just
be.
the timing of when
Yeah.
some are leaving, some are coming back, and okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And I believe that outside counsel, materials and services, I'd have to look, but I still think we budgeted like $40,000 to $45,000 a year. But there's really minimal other, little bit of travel and training, some office supplies, but it's a pretty simple budget, the city attorney's budget.
And it is anticipated that the city attorney will be able to continue the same level of services with this reduced budget.
Awesome.
I just want to put in a plug. I think we put this in 2 years ago, but our law clerks that we've had, we've gotten them certified to prosecute minor cases in our traffic court, and that's saved us a ton of money because we don't have to hire a very expensive lawyer to do that. So that's been a great benefit.
That's correct, and our current law clerk is already court certified.
Awesome. Thank you, Sebastian.
Let's see if I can get your. Hey, Brad, am I able to get my presentation back up on the big screen? Perfect.
Thank you, Sebastian.
Good evening again. My name's Lydia McAvoy. I'm the HR director for the city. You will see in my budget that we have some cost increases in human resources. What I would point out is that insurances and liability insurances sit within the human resources budget, so many of those costs are outside of our control. We were able to negotiate through our insurance broker a reduction in some of the premiums that we were previously estimated, and negotiated a reduction in their brokerage fee to try and offset some of those additional costs. Outside of that, the departmental materials and services have actually seen a reduction year on year. I know it can be hard to see that kind of contained within these numbers. In terms of what we have been active with this year, we completed AFSCME contract negotiations. We handled that in-house. We had no external counsel for those. As a department, we were able to prepare all the comps that were used for those, which provided a cost saving against using external counsel for that. We implemented a revised employee handbook, which had been, the last one was last revised in 2013, so we were able to revise and launch that. We have now fully implemented the functionality that we had purchased on our HRIS. You may recall when I was in front of the committee last year, we actually did not have an automated HRIS. Thanks to council's support, we were able to put one in place, which has allowed us to automate a lot of our processes. And we're going to be working very closely with finance to make sure that our two systems work together well to further automate that and reduce any administrative workload on managers. We did discrimination and harassment training for all of our city employees. We were about 5 years behind in delivering that as a city, so we now have that up to date and delivered, and we are nearing the completion of director, manager, and supervisor training across the board, which again is something that I think we've not had in place at the city for a long time. So we've been able to successfully deliver 3 out of 4 of those training sessions, with the next one being in June, with a view to, highly trained directors, managers, and supervisors can help drive employee performance, employee motivation. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
I think one of the reasons we decided on the HRIS system was we were having trouble answering the question of what would the impact of certain changes be on city revenue or different things. And so when you say your systems are going to be working together, is that going to help give us some of those what-if scenarios so that we can say, hey, if we increase in this department, same with when we negotiate contracts and other things, it seems like it was always, we got to go back and figure that out, and the answers came back a little bit like, well, we're not totally sure, here's our best guess. And so will this address that problem, the HRIS system with integrated into the financial system?
No. So I think what you're asking for would be more of a payroll system functionality for projections.
Okay.
What I will
Payroll is not part of the HRIS system.
Correct.
Okay.
What I will say is that given the challenging decisions that the city's had to make over the last few weeks, the HRIS, having the historical data input into it, gave us much faster ability to look at the positions across the organization, look at service and just make sure that this process was efficient as we possibly could make it.
Right.
Any further questions for HR? Nope.
Great job.
Thank
job
you
on
very
the
much.
score.
Well done.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, Brad Crawford, IT Director. For the fiscal year 25-27 budget, it's pretty status quo for us. We don't have any major exciting projects that maybe are public-facing like we did this last year. The bulk of the work we're doing next year is really back-end infrastructure upgrades. We've hit end of life on a few pieces of technology that are coming up, so we're planning for those. The big one is our storage and our server virtualization infrastructure. So that's a project we're planning for right now with an implementation in shortly after the fiscal year starts. So next year, actually in 26-27, we have a PC refresh cycle. So we've hit our 5-6 year refresh rate for our PCs. So we'll be going through those. No new software is really anticipated in this biennium. So we're making some slight changes in our Microsoft licensing levels. We're going to up our licensing level a little bit to gain some additional capabilities. That's going to allow us to get rid of a couple pieces of software that are more expensive than the increases for the Microsoft level. So we're kind of excited about that because the savings is pretty significant there by reducing, going with Microsoft AV instead of a third-party AV and going with, a different spam filter than what we currently have. So the Microsoft products have increased in a level that we feel confident that they're on par with what we currently have. So we are going to make those changes over the next 2 years. Last year we finished we are in the process of finishing the new website. So that's a project that's coming to an end here at the end of this fiscal year. I did put some money in the next year's budget so that any changes that come after we go live, if we want to make any further enhancements, there's some money there for that. And that was a council goal. There was a lot of citizen engagement goals, council goals in there, and that we feel that the new website and its capabilities will address. The other thing that where we did put a little bit of money in is for some AI software. So AI is becoming huge. We've got some staff that are already using it. So we're going to start with a formalized AI policy and then start rolling out where we can use it in effective ways to build some efficiency. So
Is that Copilot primarily?
primarily Copilot. We have some ChatGPT too, but
Concerned about controlling what you get put into open source stuff like
So,
ChatGPT?
Copilot is why we want to go there because that is now integrated into our government tenant. So that's, but we have some staff that really like to use it now. So what we've said is per city manager approval, we'll use it for basic things, drafting an email, drafting a policy, or we're not letting it touch any of our data sources. So it doesn't have anything that would be considered proprietary or confidential. So.
And we can build GPT clients that are internal only as well, that don't even go out, that are based on our own language learning model. So if we wanted to go that way as a city, to just review our own city stuff internally, we could certainly do that.
I think that's the end goal. It's just we got to put a policy around it, put some guardrails around what we're going to let it do, and then there's some really exciting things you can do when you start having a look at your operational data.
If I could, and Craig, jump in here, but one of our goals too was to look at creating efficiencies and savings through tech. And there's Craig's been we've been bringing vendors in just to talk about what the potential is, like plan review and some of these different areas. So there might be some other AI areas that could really help us out and get our staff more efficient, and maybe save some money too at the same time. So
yeah,
I get that right, Craig?
Yes, you did, Mayor. I think that's Brad's probably, I've told him talked to him several times about AI. I think on Brad's plate is he had a reduction of staff in his department. I think the big deal is to get the website completed before we go start really spending time on AI, even though I've met with quite a few people so far. But I think by next year, we'll be moving forward in some of that stuff.
I have a question about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And I'm asking this question because I heard some horror stories from cities around the country. But do we align our cybersecurity policies with our cybersecurity insurance?
I mean, yeah, we're
That's something that we monitor because there's been cities that were insured, but because their policy wasn't checking all the boxes with their insurance policy, they were not covered when they had a major issue.
The policies are written very vaguely, so it's really hard to, I mean, they're made with very broad statements whether you're in compliance. So we try our best to, a project that I'm just starting right now is a gap analysis to a federal standard, cybersecurity standard. So we want to kind of align to that. So the goal next year is hopefully having policies that align with a federal standard so that when those questions do get asked, we say we're NIST 2.0 certified. And there's a lot that requirements that come with those policies. When you have a small staff and an even smaller staff, it's really hard to meet them. So I think that's the rub that we always struggle with, and I think every small IT department does, is like, if you had lots of staff, you could do lots of really great security things, but we've got to right size it for our organization.
Perfect, thank you.
Are replacement mics that actually work?
Sorry, yes, that is in the budget too.
Yes!
Well,
Finally!
There's
Been waiting for 5 years.
a lightweight kind of AV upgrade going on, so mics are one of them, a part of that, so.
And then I know we're going to get to Sherwood broadband, but what's your split between the two?
Staff-wise?
Yeah.
So I'm 50-50. So 50% broadband, 50% IT.
And this, I don't know how to phrase this question. You seem like you have a lot on your plate.
That was well phrased.
Yeah. Is that like 50-50 is good? I don't know how to phrase that question.
Yeah.
Should he be 60-60 or?
100.
What's the?
We just clone you.
We can talk a little bit more about that in broadband. We've been on a track to kind of merge IT and broadband more and more, primarily for the broadband side of things, because as we're growing exponentially on the broadband, so the support needs there is outpacing what our staff can do in broadband. So bringing IT and broadband together on a support side is a logical thing. We already have some broadband staff that spend a little bit of time in the IT department, primarily for managing the network, and that will continue. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. So my job to manage it. So and we'll do our best. So that's it. Good.
Thanks, Brad.
Brad, great job.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about finance. Just touch on a few goals here. A few things that I am looking to implement this upcoming biennium year. Update some of our financial policies, whether that's travel policy, procurement card policy. Those are already in draft. Want to get through the biennium budget and start working with senior leadership on reviewing those over the summer. Another major project Craig and I have discussed, and I thought about for a long time, for probably the last 3 or 4 years, is really looking at our allocation module and even kind of our the makeup of departments and what funds they lie in. I've been looking at other cities, like even City of Newburgh, you know, kind of where your administration department is. So I'd like to look at some options there. And that would be a major overhaul of the whole fund structure here at the city. So that's something I want to look at here the next biennium.
Is that an off year?
Exactly. During off year, let's just throw this big project there.
Won't have anything to do next year.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You'll be bored.
And always looking at, city council's goals, of course, the department's goals, is to see what kind of grants are out there, what kind of money is out there that we can try to get in the door to help departments out and the city out. So when you take a look at finance's budget, you might think that, oh, wow, everything is going up, David. Personnel services, the reason why that's going up is more of my time is coming back into the general fund. Things are slowing down a little bit in the URA. We still have some big projects, but there's some big projects that are in the works right now, so things are slowing down on how much time I'm going to be spending on in the Urban Renewal Agency, working on the books or working on whether it's forecasts or analysis. Materials and services. This is kind of the same with HR. as Lydia has explained, we have a lot of costs in there that are citywide, whether it's for our external auditors. There's certain professional services that we have to use in order to get numbers that we have to put in our audit, because I'm not an actuarial, it takes specialized skills. So we're coming back up on having our post-employment benefit plan, having to go through the actuarial evaluation. It's split across all the municipalities, but still a cost that we got to pay. So really, in terms of travel and training, that is down. Office supplies are down, but there's certain costs that I can't control that are going up. With that, I'm open up to any questions on finance before I jump into municipal courts.
Going back to the KPIs, this might be another place for an asterisk. Unqualified doesn't sound good, but I'm guessing it probably is good.
That is actually a terminology. It is interesting. Is qualified? A qualified opinion is a bad opinion.
Yeah.
A modified opinion, meaning there's something a little wrong, and unqualified is good. It's like, I remember when I first started in this industry, can't we just be like thumbs up, thumbs down, or maybe just kind of modified? But yeah, that is standard terminology and is used in our audit report. So, but I could always put an asterisk there, meaning it's a clean opinion on the financial statements.
Or even change it and have the asterisk go to the nerdy financial term, because, most of the public reading that would be like,
unqualified.
Yeah. Exactly. It was interesting. There had been times when I worked on the other side, when I worked for, actually, Katie and I worked for the same company, where I'd go present to council members. I'm like, okay, so you received a qualified opinion.
They're like, great.
Yeah, they thought it was good. I'm like, no, that's not a clean opinion on the financial statements. So, all right, so municipal courts, just a few highlights here. This is one department that was affected by the, whether it was the downturn in the revenue from the camera systems, or just the state of the unbalanced budget or the budget shortfall here. One thing we're really going to look at is, review possible modification of court schedule as things are slowing down. We don't need to have court every Friday. Maybe it's every other Friday. I know things that I've floated out there. Is there any ways we can streamline processes like technology? Is there a payment kiosk we can put upstairs, so instead of interrupting staff? You're always going to have to answer questions, but if you're just up there to make a payment, you make a payment on a kiosk versus having my staff have to come up there and take the payment and run it. So, we're looking at how we can streamline processes in the courts, and we always have to look at additional judges, like the ones that fill in for Judge Jack. But Judge Jack, he's retired, so there's going to have to be some kind of transition plan eventually. So I know that's one thing Lisa's going to focus on. She's the court supervisor.
So on this one, that operating expenses, we think is, if we cut that number in half, it's 7.5 something. We think that goes down the 1.5 million.
Yes, you take that divided by 2.
Right, but so we think we're saving 160, or 100 and something $1,000.
Well, there's also additional costs in there, because now that those camera systems are up online, we're now paying the full freight, where before we are getting discounts, where with the construction going on over at Roy Rogers and 99, like the red light camera system was down, so every month we'd be receiving about a $2,000 to $3,000 discount on our bill. Okay. Now everything is back up online, and those costs have gone up about another. In total, now we're paying full freight. It's about a $50,000 or $60,000 additionally a year, and probably within the last few years, this company is now adjusting for in accordance with the CPI West Index. So every year, they're bumping it up. When before it used to be a flat fee every month, now they're bumping up their cost too to cover their costs.
Okay.
What's that?
They're bumping it every month?
Well, I guess it's safe. It's a 5% increase every month. You're going to see a 5% increase, not 5% September, then additional 5%. So you could take that 10.
5% on an annualized basis?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
scared there for a second. Yeah.
You know, as for the municipal court, when you look at their overall budget, you know, before this whole construction, we could easily, in terms of revenue from the tickets, we could pull in $2.2 to $2.3 million in just ticketable offenses. Being the conservative nature, I don't think I could budget more than $1.8 million. So yeah, we're seeing a $400,000 or $500,000 hit in this area. As for personnel services, that is down. We're reduced by 1.5 FTE. Materials and services are up. You can see that increase, even though we cut in other areas. It's that red light camera system that's a little over $300,000 a year, and then it gets adjusted annually for inflation. So
we think that money went down due to behavior modification, you know, after all the construction's done.
Design improvements.
Yeah.
Design improvements, but we have had a law passed that says we could put portable ones up. Is that a discussion to modify behavior at other places like school zones and stuff like that?
Sunset.
Council discussion at some later point.
And I think that's something we need, our traffic safety committee needs to start working on.
Okay.
Make recommendations.
Do you have modular units that they can move around like?
Well, the technology's been there for a long time, but the state has finally granted cities the power to do it.
Yeah.
To write tickets off of them.
To write tickets,
off.
issue tickets off them, and you don't have to have a police officer standing by the camera.
Yeah.
So, same question as before, the traffic ticket revenue, you know, that $200 ticket, that gets split between the county and the state and us. This is just our portion?
This is just our portion, not what we're, sending on to the county. And basically, when a ticket comes in, we put it in different buckets, how we record it. Our portion of revenue gets recorded as revenue. Other portion is in various liability, because whether we owe the state or the county, that portion is put in that bucket, and then every month we send them their share of whatever we collected for the month. It's kind of once a month we remit to them.
Does the revenue include the portion that we send to Redflex? That's also in the
No,
expense line?
it's just the dollars that we receive. So it doesn't include the portion we receive, or that Redflex charges us.
He's asking is,
But then why would it be in the expense line if we're not booking the money we pay?
Are you?
this revenue includes what we would pay Redflex for the cameras, correct? You're not deducting the Redflex revenue.
No. This is actually money we took in the door. I'm sorry if I misunderstood.
So the Redflex, what we pay Redflex is included in the revenue and the expense?
No, it's only in the materials and services, what we pay them.
I don't think you're understanding. We take out the state piece and the county piece because that's a pass-through to another agency. Redflex is a vendor. We do not take that out as a pass-through out of the revenue.
Correct.
We pay it as an expense.
We pay it as
So
an
it's in the
expense.
revenue. The portion that we end up giving Redflex is in this top line
Yes,
revenue
because it comes
number.
out of our portion.
Yeah.
But David just said no to me twice, so I'm trying to get clarity on this.
I'm trying to clarify. We pay Redflex a fee every month. It's down here in materials and services.
Right, but the top line then would include that fee. We took that in, we're including it, we're booking it as revenue, and then we're booking it as an expense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
No worries.
So, I'm gonna ask.
Didn't come up. Did you have a question?
I know we're harping on this, but I just want to make sure. Because the Redflex cost is an expense, it's covered by our portion of the revenue in the top line.
Why doesn't everybody pay for it? Why doesn't?
Well, no, but I just want to make sure we got this right.
I would want to, why don't I read the contract? I don't manage that contract. Why don't I read what that contract actually says first before I answer that?
Well,
But it's a budget question, not a contract. I mean, like,
Is this our net revenue?
or is it gross revenue?
No, this is our net revenue that stays with the city, net revenue.
Okay, let's take the pass-throughs to state and city and county out of it. That top line number, right, that is, a portion of the money in that top line is paying our fees to Redflex.
Yes.
Okay. That's what that was asking.
Cool. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Budget Committee. Eric Rutledge, Community Development Director. So CD management, this is a fund that's mainly used to pay salaries for myself and one other staff member. Not a big change in anything for personnel services. What I would point you to in this one is materials and service. Last year we had 76,000. This year we were able to get that down to 21. That's because we switched to Acela, our building permit, and it's our e-permitting software. So before we were using Infor, which we paid for. The state offers Acela for free, so we were able to take advantage of that. The 20,000 is just on-call consultant services if we need consultant services.
I didn't know the state did anything for free.
Well, I mean, to be clear, they pay for that program out of the fees that they collect from cities that are paid for by the developers and applicants. So they give it back to us for free.
Very kind of them.
Go to the next slide. Planning, so planning department, of course, does long-range current planning. I think the big projects we have on our plate moving forward for the next 2 years, of course, Sherwood West. We got the UGB expansion approved, so we'll move into comprehensive planning for Sherwood West. That'll be a pretty big lift, but I think something that's exciting for the community. The other thing that we're working on in terms of planning is the Old Town Strategic Plan. So we'll wrap that up probably just into the next fiscal year. We'll wrap that up, and then we'll move into implementation of that Old Town Strategic Plan. So that's an exciting project. And then, of course, planning just processes all of the land use applications, development review applications for the city. In terms of budget numbers, we are looking at a fairly significant increase in department revenue from last year to the next 2 fiscal years. That's mainly due to the grant that we expect to get from Metro for the Sherwood West planning. So we expect over the course of that project, Metro will fund about $700,000 of comprehensive planning, which is great. It does cost that much, potentially even more, but I expect a bulk of that's going to be funded by Metro. In terms of personnel services, we were impacted by the layoffs in the planning department, so decrease in personnel services there. Materials and services, in terms of what we're paying out, the 284 and then the 410, that would be primarily the consultant services that we're going to pay for with the Metro grant. So kind of we get it in, and then we dish it out to the consultant to get the plan done.
A question on that. So we spent 322 this year. We're projecting or adopted 285 next year.
Yep.
So even though we have this huge project, our total spend is going to go down?
Yeah, so good catch.
Replacing projects that ended, I assume.
Good catch. The 322, we actually budgeted $200,000 this fiscal year to do an E.D. Elwart study that would have led into Sherwood West comprehensive planning. And in speaking with Craig and Rich and Jason, we're actually able to pay for that out of a different budget item, street fund. Basically, we could pay for planning work. And so we actually did not spend. That's the adopted budget for this year. When we get the actuals, it's going to be like $200,000 lower. Yeah.
So we're going to do that work within the overall Sherwood West.
We're still doing it separately. It'll be before Sherwood West really kicks off, and it's going to be paid for out of the street fund.
Okay, so we'll see it there
Yep.
when we get to that. Okay.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
I know we've talked about this privately before, but accelerating Sherwood West in any way, would that get us out of any of the budgetary problems that we're having?
No.
Like getting housing in
No.
there and all, okay.
No.
All right.
Yeah. And I think that's a good segue into building. So, just want to give my 2 cents on kind of where we're at with development. We are projecting a slowdown in the number of projects that are coming through the planning and the building department. I think we have worked in, just with all the uncertainty that is in the world right now, we have worked in some decline there. I think that's probably a safe conservative move. Really, I think what's driving the reduction is we need to deliver some key pieces of infrastructure that will then, incentivize the development to happen. So Ice Age Drive up in the Tonkin employment area, we're going to go to construction this year. There are vacant properties in there that I'm fully confident, unless we get some crazy downturn, as soon as we get that road in, those properties are going to be ready. We're going to see activity from those property owners, either developing the properties themselves or selling to a developer. But that road's going to take a year and a half to build. They need 6 months to a year to get their approvals, and then we're already out of this 2-year fiscal cycle. So I think, we are looking at more development. There is more coming, but it's just really the phasing of the infrastructure of why we're looking at the downturn over the next 2 years. The other thing I would add is that when you look at our Tonkin employment area, there were a few really large, easily accessible sites, like along Tualatin Sherwood Road, along Oregon Street, and those have been developed, and those fees have come in. So I call them the big fish. We've kind of gotten the big fish, and we just issued building permits last week for the last 2 big fish, and so that revenue will come in this fiscal year. There will be a little bit as they build out the tenant spaces. There'll be some additional revenue, but we've kind of gotten the big fish in the Tonkin employment area, and so that's going to impact the general fund, revenue. What I will for the next 2 fiscal years, what I will say is, getting that development is great. It's going to impact and have a positive impact either on the general fund or the urban renewal agency for the foreseeable future. So it's, we get a short-term bump in permit fees, but really the strategy of the city is to diversify the tax base, and that is happening, even though we're looking at the downturn over the next 2 years roughly. So the other thing, as Craig mentioned earlier, we did raise fees this year, and so the year-to-year revenue between this year and the next 2 years is not a huge dip in the building department. That's because we increased fees fairly significantly, and then personnel services just slightly down as well. And I think that's it. I think really for the metrics, we're really just looking at getting permits out the door as quickly as possible for the building department.
Huh? I might, yeah. I brought all sorts of stuff so I could see. So, Ty Hanlon, Chief Police here. Thanks for having me tonight. I want to direct you to the top line there where it says number of sworn officers, 60. I am in favor of all of those, so I'll take them if we can make it happen.
We got to get our population up to 42,000.
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about that. You just
That's in the forecast, right? Yeah.
I think, so I know Kristen alluded to it a little earlier that those were the combinations. Just for clarification on that, we're in fact at 28 and 28, so I'm not quite sure why it ends up with 60, but that's where we are for the next 2 years with police officers. So in total FTEs, we're actually 33 with the support staff. So you're going to see we lost a half FTE this budget. It was somebody, and it's been talked about, our Redflex support person. They managed and dealt with that. They were actually really instrumental. They've had a number of years in it, so we'll be taking that back within the patrol arena. We'll be taking back some code enforcement. So we'll be busy in the PD, which we had code for a number of years, so it'll be just some adjustments there. But
when you had code prior, we just had one person that did code and evidence, but now we have 2.
So we actually have the split, yes.
Yeah.
Just because we are so busy.
Yeah.
You actually look at our stats. You actually look at technology just in and of itself is a heavy lift for us with
Evidence.
Axon, body-worn cameras, drone footage, all the things that we're utilizing. It takes quite a bit to manage. And actually, you will see in our materials and services that we had a slight increase. And one of the things, and actually I think David talked about it earlier, is maxing out that general fund. we're tapping that out with the PD as well. Our materials and services that you see, the 849 there, nearly half of that is just in technology. So WACA, which is our dispatch, we had a 9% hit this year. We're going to have probably another 9% hit next year. That trend is uphill, and the ask and the budgets are downhill for us. So those crossroads are hitting earlier for us in the PD. We have year over year 5% increases with Axon body-worn cameras, with our tasers. So we're continuing to be hit just in our technology side with obviously no end in sight for that. So, and then you couple that with just personnel costs, we'll be maxed out here soon.
Chief, a
Yes, sir.
question on that. Are we looking at cooperative buying for some of that stuff? Because there's some cooperative buying like Sourcewell, Carousel, AFI, where you can pool with many police departments to get better pricing on that stuff?
So originally, we did couple with an agency for our body-worn cameras and Axons when we first got into it, and it was beneficial, but everybody's kind of gone their own ways. I like the idea, it's just, it hasn't, that discussion hasn't come back up anymore, everybody's. So now, there might be some energy there because all the agencies in Washington County are now on Axon. There were some that were using different body-worn camera systems, but I think collectively, we have that ability to maybe address that in the future.
And that all their budgets are.
Yeah, and everybody's where we're at. Axon supplies nearly everything that we wear, aside from our guns and our radios. And incidentally, the Motorola radios, this is probably the most expensive thing I'm wearing right now, $8,000. $8,000 for a radio. What hit us the worst this year is we would send, something would go down, we'd send this in for a repair, and it would be around $500-600. It's $1,200 to $1,300 now for a repair. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, kind of what they've done, and I say to us, they know we need obviously the equipment, and so they can set their prices more than
competitor for that?
No, that's the problem. It's kind of like Axon. There's really no competition out there for them.
There you go, Taylor, entrepreneur over there.
One of the things, I'm sorry.
I'll send you some of those procurement organizations or nonprofits, because I'm pretty sure I've seen Axon in some of those. So.
Axon's on Sourcewell.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Great opportunity to maybe save some money there. You can see in the, oh, it's not up there. I have it in front of me, but in your book, you can see our pie graph of just our calls for service. You can see over the last 4 years, we trend pretty close to about $6,000, or $6,000, 6,000 calls for service. That's when somebody dials 911 or the non-emergency. What is a standout in this last year is just our self-initiated. The proactivities, our officers are out there being engaged, they're being proactive. And it kind of goes in line with some of our goals. You can see one of the biggest things that we're looking to do is obviously impact retail theft, impact drug use. And so that takes us to being proactive out there, talking to people, looking for things. It's no secret, and unfortunately, number one is always a great place to be unless you're number one in opioid deaths, which Oregon ranks number one. It's not the record we want when you can, I can't think of the name of the diversion. Thank you, jeez. When you can go into diversion, so if you go through the program, and this won't be on your record, it's a good opportunity, so if you've made a mistake and you get a second chance. That's how the new drug laws are working. It seems to have some success, so we're going to continue with that, but also, I guess it's on page 80. You can see some of our goals that we're continuing to work with. And I alluded to it just on the increase of theft and fraud. It's no secret. Obviously, we have some big retailers here that get hit often. And we spend a considerable amount of time there dealing with those. Our other big thing is just the mental health component that we've seen across the nation.
We have a great team, the mental health response team. We have a member on it. So that's been incredibly successful. And probably the biggest highlight of that for me is the use of force. So historically, when we've had to respond to people in a mental health crisis, it wasn't a crime, but law enforcement was asked to deal with it in that way. And so it always tended to end with a use of force, take them to jail, not know exactly what to do with them. Since we've addressed this and come a long ways, countywide, we're at about a 1% use of force rate, which is fantastic. And I tell you that because the officers and the clinicians are able to go out and address these people, give them resources, and deal with them in a manner that's much more efficient and healthier for them. It's not us trying to figure out what kind of crime they committed, because that's where they boxed us in. We had to figure out what did they do, and then it just didn't end well in a lot of ways. So really proud of the fact that that is where we're at on the use of force scale. It's just, it's rarely used.
1% use of force in all calls or in
Yes.
mental health specific calls?
In the MHRT world, not
Not department-wide.
Right, and we're probably pretty close to that just in the department.
Yeah.
And just for, could you define, what is defined as use of force?
Thanks, Mayor. So there's a lot of ways that that's gauged. I think everybody will go right to, knockdown, drag out kind of use of force, which in fact, that's not the way we track it. If I am to display a taser and take it out and point it at you and actually tell you that I'm going to use this kind of force, that would be considered use of force. We'll write a report on that. If I take this out and I'm telling you I'm going to tase you if you don't comply, that's use of force.
Even if you don't use it?
Even if I don't use it. So that rolls into that 1%. If I take my handgun out for whatever reason, it's considered a use of force. It's a display. I mean, I'm displaying a use of force. So you see the handgun out, you're going to think that's not a good thing. So you generally will comply. So to track that and to put it in perspective, yeah, I mean, the real physical hands-on is very little. So it's kind of cool to see some of those things. We're into the drone program. We have acquired 3 drones through the foundation, and we're actually utilizing them now, which is fantastic. They augment a lot of the things that we do out there. They're obviously driven by officer safety. We can send a drone out. We can send them into buildings. We have dogs that offset that. So a lot of times, obviously, the dogs are out there and they track by scent. And you'll see if you're watching the cop movies, you'll get the drone up there and you'll get the hot spots through thermals to say, hey, we're picking up hot spots here or there or the other. You can direct officers and canines into those areas much safer than we used to. Search and rescue. There's some legislation right now that's lifting some of the restrictions, so we'll have more tools, or I guess more opportunities to use them. So,
what kind of restrictions?
Space, privacy, where we
Like
could
over
fly.
people's private property, kind of.
So right now, when you go up, you have to have an observer. So literally, if I'm in control, I need to use Craig to go up and tell me that he can see this thing. I'm not sure why, but he needs to be able to see this thing. They're removing some of those limitations to allow you to fly 2 miles now without an observer. So technically, I can put one on this building and fly the entire city with just one operator, which will be really nice once we get there. So
City of Gresham's doing that. I got to tour their drone command center. It's amazing what they can do with it.
yeah, the technology's it's pretty awesome.
Tell me what you can do with it, just for the public. So
I'm sorry?
Come to a meeting and find out, what can you do with the drone?
So
No, it's faster, but what?
well, yeah, so it can go up. It's just eyes in the sky, officer safety stuff. So I can get up over a retailer. I can get up over a house. I can get up over a barricaded subject, and we can be looking down, and we can be picking up thermal images, heat from our bodies. So rather than us guessing, we have a really good idea where somebody might be. In buildings, in schools, we can fly in schools. Incident goes down in the school, we can fly in there. As a matter of fact, you can land a drone in a hallway, now you have eyes on down a hallway. It's endless. I said search and rescue. somebody walks away, child walks away, we can search Stella, we can search all these parks really quickly.
And the officer operating the drone is communicating to the officer responding, so they're getting intel
Yep.
about what's going on before they even arrive. And in Gresham had a great example, and there was a fire, and they were able to locate two people that were trapped in the backyard pen between the house and the fire, and were able to get people back there to get them out before they were killed. So there's
Yeah, that was a great illustration that the PD was able to identify where they were, so fire was able to cut through this arborvitaes to get to them. So exciting stuff. I get that, people have the impression that they invade privacy. What's really cool about these is it tracks everywhere you go. It tracks the camera view. So if anybody ever came to us and said, hey, you were looking in our backyard, we can go back and say, well, no, this is actually the flight path. This was the camera views. And we can defend, what we're doing and how we're utilizing these tools. So, cool stuff. Obviously, our community engagement's a big thing for us, our social media. That's how we really stay connected. I think we've done a really good job over the last few years to keep people up to speed in what we're doing and what we're about, and obviously all of our events that we have. So I think it's something that we're going to continue to maintain. It's popular. I get asked all the time where Crime and Chronicles is. So
how many followers do we have now?
Nearly 50,000. Yeah.
Wow.
But not just for the city, right? You're having other people.
Oh, yeah. That's 2.5 times the population.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Those are big numbers.
We have people that are following us across the nation. It's
Probably,
yeah, that's
probably
what-
internationally.
It's
too,
kind
I
of
guess.
fun, yeah. Other than that, I mean, you have some highlights of this last year. Nothing significant there, but I just wanted to touch on. Obviously, we lost the half-person personnel, and just what our materials and services look like, and kind of that headwind that we're facing with all these things that we utilize but are important. So,
Can I ask a question on staffing?
yes.
I believe in the past we talked about career cycle planning, and there was a separate fund, I think it was, that was allocated specifically for that, or was it in the general fund?
It
I
was
don't
money
remember.
we moved from a separate fund into the general fund to help cover
Okay.
kind of the career cycle planning.
Are any of those planned in the biennium to do any additional career cycle planning for police?
Just a little bit upcoming, but there's some retirements upcoming, but after that, you're
Kind of
looking-
one-for-one replacement in this budget.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then I think we had talked at a past budget committee meeting about an additional sergeant that was needed. That is not in the budget.
None.
No, okay.
No.
Yeah, the only addition for this budget next biennium, besides the cuts we had to make, is that communication engagement coordinator. So,
I just didn't know if there was a staffing shift around, like like one less on patrol or one extra,
exactly.
Okay.
Nope.
And I think the one thing that I don't want to lose sight of in our partnership with the school district is we do have the 2 SROs. And each one is 50% funded by the school district, so we get one full FTE from the school district for those. So solid, great relationship we have with them that we're hoping that continues.
I have a question, because in the beginning you mentioned all the theft that we're dealing with, shoplifting in our large box retailers. I'm trying to be careful how I ask this. How are they partnering? Because there's a partnership that occurs with their loss prevention folks and our officers. Are they partnering well with us, or?
Yes. It ebbs and flows, and so retail theft obviously is prolific. Their loss prevention comes and goes, and so it's all about relationships. So if somebody leaves and somebody new comes in, we have to establish that, and once we do, we're much more successful within there. And as you've seen probably over the years, these big retailers change their policies, and so we have to adapt to them. A lot of them don't engage. I know of one in town that literally does nothing. Others, they have parameters that are set in place before they call us. So sometimes it can be challenging, but we still do have good relationships with them. It's just there is a turnover, and so then you have to figure out who's who and how we want to work with them.
What about your cadet group?
No cadets. So we had them prior to, and yeah, thanks. Actually, I can touch on that real quick. Prior to COVID, we had started it. So cadets are 16 to 20. We'd gotten it up and running, and then COVID hit, and it's been disassembled. We haven't had a chance to get that back up and going, along with our Citizens Academy that we've talked about a number of times, and we've tried. So we're going to give it a try again. I think we're going to do the culmination of maybe a citywide academy where the police department's a part of it. We do have a reserve program that's been very successful. As a matter of fact, our last 2 hires that are at the academy and that are a part of the CCP money came out of our reserve program. So very beneficial. We have 3 right now that are working with us. So I think it's a great program. It helps us with events and things that come up where we need an extra body and an extra hand, and it doesn't have to
And it's
go
great
to
for
overtime.
them, right? I mean, it's a good recruiting tool for them because they then can have a great resume when they.
Yes, and we hope that they want to come work with us. Most of the time, yeah. I mean,
But
then
if
it's
you don't
great.
have room for them, it's still a great
Yes.
opportunity because they've had this
Yeah, 100%.
on their resume.
Yep.
Go back.
This might be a little too in the weeds, but it looks like there was a big jump in school-generated youth-involved calls for service. Do you know what may have caused on page 79? It went from 36 to 117.
So, yes, the SROs take all, I shouldn't say all, most 307s. So DHS referral, any kind of abuse that's related. So a lot of times it would go to dispatch and then go to the patrol. We've moved that all into the hands of the SROs, unless it's an adult and outside of the school realm. So that's part of the hit there with that. And then a little bit more aggressive with PCS, vapes, those kind of things, just trying to engage
There
those.
was a huge decline during COVID, mainly because of kids were not in school, they were at home, so the cases were getting reported too.
And there's that, yeah. But that's the big driver for that.
Yeah, no, just curious.
No, good question. Okay.
Great job, Chief.
Hi. Hello. I'm Adrienne Dolman-Calkins. I'm the library manager here. Thank you for making time for me. And I'll point out, library is a department of the Community Services Division. I don't know if we're going to get to all of those today, but Kristen might chime in on different points with this. So we're on page 82 in your budget book. And I'll point out just a couple things here on the goals. Our very first one about the Funding and Governance Evaluation Project is going to come up when I talk about revenue. And then also the levy, which is scheduled for November 2025, also is going to impact our revenue. So I'll talk about that in a moment. I wasn't going to spend much time on this slide, actually, because I anticipated more questions on the next one.
Okay.
But we can go back if others have questions. Thank you. So we expect a 1% increase from Washington County Cooperative Library Services. That's our main source of revenue. Normally, we would have expected a 3% increase, but the county, as you know, is having budget deficits, and so we've had a decrease there. We also, in year 2 of the budget, have less predictability, so we've budgeted very conservatively. We budgeted with a 1% increase again, but because of that levy and because of the Funding and Governance Evaluation Project, which would take that levy dollars and plan funding allocation to all the member libraries in the county, we're hoping, we have seen some draft numbers that would be way better than this. We'll have to come to the supplemental budget process and come to you with new numbers when we know those. There are reductions in the library budget. In personnel, it looks like an increase, but we're losing 0.5 FTE for a youth services position, a part-time librarian 1 position. And then we're also seeing a reduction of our on-call hours, about half of our on-call hours. And so we will need to reduce some services and reduce hours with this budget. The library's open 60 hours a week, 7 days. We would need to go down to 53 hours. We'd still be able to do 7 days with that. We would have some reductions with some services and some programs. So library story times, we currently have 6 sessions. We would need to go down to 4 sessions. We would still have for all ages from birth through pre-K. And then some other library events, classes, and services would have some reductions and redistribution among other staff. We also have some reductions in materials and services. I think the public won't notice that quite as much. It mostly does impact the collection budget, though. That's our biggest slice of the pie after personnel. So that was my speed version. I have a lot of content here expecting questions, but what can I share?
They're not really budget questions.
No? No budget questions? Oh, you had a question. Do you want me to answer?
It wasn't a budget question. It was more of an operational question. We can take it offline.
I sketched out a pie graph for you, Counselor. It's a little sloppy, but
you can show me after.
So, okay, I'll do that. Yeah.
I had just asked if we allocated hours to what program, right? So desk versus reading versus whatever other millions of programs, great programs we have. And that was all. So
yeah.
If you want to share, you can. If we can take it offline if you want. But.
So what I did is I took the FTE in the proposed budget, which would go down to 10.48, and I looked at our organizational chart. And we have a lot of cross-training. We wear a lot of hats, and so it's hard to get precisely at that, but roughly library management, which there's 2 of us on that team, is 19% of our time. We do spend a lot of time with other tasks besides that. And then our public-facing librarians who are doing programming, they're selecting material, they're curating the collection, managing it. They also do front desk circulation, and they also do reference and readers advisory, some admin and IT. That's about 29%. And then what we call technical services, very different than Brad's department. Technical services in library land is more about making sure items are cataloged, that they're processed, that they're available to be found in the collection. That department or group is 15%. They also do some customer service. And then our direct customer service, what we call circulation, helping with managing accounts and checkout and check-in, materials movement, that's about 37%. And I have a pie. That was the back of the napkin. I got a text from Kristen during the meeting. But I know it wasn't exactly what you asked, but this is what I could do here in the room.
Yeah. And that's like more allocating like every person to one thing.
Yeah.
Where I was more thinking like everyone does a bunch of different things. So I was just more thinking like if you had 10 FTEs, it's roughly 20,000 hours a year. How many? Like what percentage of hours are spent on collection management versus desk versus, and if you don't have that information, I'm not, this is more of an operational question than a budget question, but it helps.
I also sketched it out for the position that's being reduced. So the 20-hour librarian 1 position, that person does 25% in circulation, so at the front desk. And then 25 to 50% of the time programming or doing programming prep, so that includes story times, teen book club, things like that.
Yeah.
And then depending on how busy that is, the remainder, 25 to 50%, is selecting materials for the collection, managing those purchases, pulling older materials off the shelves, replacing them, and some admin duties. So that's for that 1 position. Yeah.
So the one thing I did want to mention is with the reduction in hours, Adrian has been looking along with Jenny at what hours are least popular. I mean, we have a way of a door count and a way to take a look at when the library is being used. So obviously we're taking that into consideration and making sure that we're either opening a little bit later or closing a little bit earlier, and that there's going to be as little of impact on the community as possible.
But we won't be cutting that hour after after school gets out?
We're going to close from 3 to 4.
Well, I'm just wondering, like,
No.
because maybe I'm completely off base here, but it seems possible that a lull could be almost like late morning, early afternoon. So you have like
I have
open, you don't have to
hours.
close earlier or open later, but you have like a maybe close for lunch kind of thing. I don't know.
I have this memorized, but I want to
Well,
make
and
sure
it
I say
also
the right
has to do
thing.
with just library shifts and having the employees
Of
come in.
course,
So there is some thought that goes into, making sure that if we don't have to have 3 people come in for the day and 2 people can cover that shift as opposed to 3, then that makes more sense. Because obviously
We're
they're not.
really in the weeds here, and that was
Yes,
not my intent.
yes.
What in this line of question, so I apologize.
Do you want me to say what the proposed new schedule would be? Is that helpful, or is that too?
I don't think that's-
Or Nancy had
My
a question too.
was going to be, in the future, when you're writing a bond, I think the public who voted yes on it assumed it was going to go to the library. And if they knew it was going to go to Washington County so that they could fill in their gaps, I think the general population would be outraged. I don't think they know about it. I hope you all figure it out really quick.
So those are, so it's still, no decisions have been made at Washington, and it's, the levy you're referring to
I'm referring
is
to
a
the levy.
Washington County levy that
we
funds the
voted on.
library system. The mayors across Washington County are engaged in
Thank you.
entertaining conversations with the county on this subject, and we're keenly aware that of how that works in the impacts, and if they're going to raise levy rates and then at the same time say reduce services. I'm not saying that's the current plan, but if they did that, obviously we need to inform the voters about that, because that's not right either. So, but those conversations are occurring. We had a work session, if anyone wants to go back and tune in on it, where we talked just Tuesday night.
Yep.
Highly recommend. It was very,
Very good, Adrian,
very
very
Thank
great
you.
job.
Thank
That
you.
has a lot of good information on that, but it is a concern, as all the agencies around us are tightening budgets. They're either pushing costs off on the other people, or, so we're keenly aware of that. We're working
And
on that.
Nancy, I'll do a plug here as well. If you'd like to make sure you're giving your money directly to Sherwood, there's a shelf, the Sherwood Library Foundation is called Shelf, and they did get a big grant recently, or donation, but you can, if you'd like to set that up, you can give money directly to the Sherwood Library that way.
Oh, well, it goes through the foundation, and the
It goes to the
foundation
foundation,
determines what
yes.
it gets used on, right?
And maybe what
Yes.
we need to do is write that up in the next thing that's being sent out
Archer,
to the
the Archer.
population of Sherwood, because they're gonna wonder, they okayed a levy for a reason. They like books, they like libraries. We want to be a well-educated city.
Well, I will also, while the mayors are also discussing this, Kristen and Adrian have sat on a committee for well over a year, right? With, I don't know, weekly, monthly. I joke that it almost became their full-time job recently. This committee that's helping inform whatever they're going to do in the levy, and each city gets a chance to vote on things, and it's,
Thank you.
it's been a lot of work. A lot of work.
We'll know in September is when we expect to know if the funding formula or the funding allocation is approved, and it has to go through, we advise the Board of County Commissioners, this group that Kristen and I are repping Sherwood for. And so we've seen draft proposals, but now they're going to spend several months working on governance as well, about roles and responsibilities for the member libraries and the county. And then that will be all packaged up. So Sherwood will get an opportunity to weigh in on the formula, the service area map, which is our population size for not just the city, but the broader area we serve, and then the governance. It will all go in an intergovernmental agreement, which will have the 5-year funding distribution of levy dollars and county general fund dollars to the member libraries. So we'll know more this
and
fall. Yeah.
But the conservative approach is spot on, because there's a lot of risk, like in the current proposed formula, we make a little more, but there's some larger cities that are losing a lot. So there's going to be a lot of conversations in the county about that formula, so we don't want to count on it yet.
And just to be clear, the revenue here is not counting on the new formula, right? The projected revenue, I mean, it's counting on
Right.
some more status
It's just
quo-ish.
exactly, yeah.
Smart,
And
yeah.
also the 5-year forecast, correct, David? That the 5-year forecast does not include these draft formulas we've seen of what Sherwood would get. It is the conservative estimate.
Is there going to be an opportunity, or are there ways people can help get involved in that process to advocate for, a specific, to advocate for our library and our community?
The only public meetings in the process are the Board of County Commissioner meetings. So they had a meeting, was it March 6th or February 6th? Was a significant meeting where they talked about some pieces of this moving forward. And June 10th, I believe it is when they are going to be listening to some proposals from Washington County. Board of County Commissioners will hear proposals from WCCOS and county staff at a work session. So that would be the next public opportunity. Sherwood gets one vote, though. So even if you advocate at city council, and then Sherwood has our one vote, in order to move something forward to the county, it's 2/3 majority vote of the city members, and there are 9 of us, right? And so 6 voting yes would move it forward, and then 3 nonprofits, has to be 2/3 of them.
And even then, it's advisory to
Yeah,
the
you're
county
right,
commissioners.
yeah. There's
But you could get involved in the levy process
Yeah.
and promoting the levy if that's something that
Right.
you choose to do.
Thank you.
November.
Good. There is a PAC. There's a People for Libraries for Washington County. Yeah.
And as we know more details of where they're leaning on their proposal, we'll definitely get the word out so citizens can do letter writing campaigns to the commissioners, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and kind of just the only reason I asked was just trying to get involved early to make it clear that people were paying attention and that,
I think letters to the
that should be factored into their decision.
telling them that we are watching
Yeah.
what they're doing, not just with this, but with the water and various other things they are getting involved in.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Great
thanks. You're welcome.
So I know we're at time. I would entertain the idea we finish community services, which is 4 more, and then break before public works, but we can,
It's more than 4.
It's up to,
I only count 4 in mine.
it's up to all of you. There's not a
4 more
ton of stuff
community
there, but I'll be
services.
here next week as well, so.
I would
Sure.
come back next
Okay,
Thursday.
it's fine for me.
This is my vote.
Breaking point. Oh, I didn't wait for that question to come up. And I should have.
Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
All right, adjourned.